Varos had never imagined he would taste death in such a sudden, brutal manner. His vision was a haze of torchlight and blood as he lay sprawled across the shattered remains of what had once been the tall, ornate door to his private chambers. The stench of copper filled the air. His own blood trickled in streams from deep cuts across his abdomen and neck. Pain flashed in waves, fierce and merciless, every breath a ragged gasp. Outside, the corridors of the Red Keep echoed with frantic shouts, footsteps pounding on stone, the clang of drawn steel. And there he was, this once fearsome sorcerer, undone by 4 merciless infiltrators who had struck him down in mere heartbeats, moving with quiet lethality through the darkness. Each assassin's face had been set in cold determination, their knives cutting so quickly that his body had not yet understood it was dying until after he collapsed in a wave of searing agony. He remembered the room's silence before the assault. He had been reading by the light of a single candelabra, an archaic tome describing lost arts of magic from ages past. The hour was late, the hustle of the castle subdued. Only a pair of loyal guards, assigned to Varos personally, had waited outside the door. He heard no cry of alarm, no clash. Suddenly, the door cracked, and his guards tumbled in with their throats slashed. The 4 black-clad figures stepped over the fresh corpses as though it were no inconvenience. In those fleeting seconds, Varos had tried to raise a protective incantation, but a blade glinted in the candlelight, opening a wide gash across his rib cage. Another slice hammered into his shoulder. Blood spattered the floor. He strove to chant a last desperate phrase, to summon flame in the air, but the final blow at his throat halted his voice. A searing slash left him choking on warmth that poured down his chest. The intruders had hissed something about their mission, how they served a higher calling, that he was marked for death. He had sunk to the floor, coldness seeping into his limbs, trying to mouth a question that never formed. Next, all was delirium. Now, as he teetered on the edge, consciousness wavered. He could feel his heart fluttering erratically, blood draining away with each sputtering breath. Shouts began to reverberate down the corridor. A woman's voice, fierce and commanding, demanding to know who had done this. Men rushed in, armor clanking. A red cloak or 2 flickered in his vision, but it was all murky shapes. He tried to speak, to utter a final phrase if any flame of magic remained in his soul. Instead, a mad cackle bubbled up from the ruin of his throat, grotesque and gurgling. It was as if some dark humor had overtaken him. He, who had once wielded formidable powers, laid low by silent phantoms. His laughter choked on blood, a dreadful rattling that stabbed at the ears of those who arrived. He saw a swirl of movement, familiar faces contorted in horror. He thought he recognized a queenly figure kneeling, pressing her hands to his chest, tears streaking her cheeks. Voices called for a maester, for red priests, anything. He felt the pressure of hands over his largest wound, but it might as well have been someone trying to dam a roaring river with bare fingers. The floor beneath him was soaked, the stone turning slick. He parted his lips to speak, but only managed another strangled cough. Then the world tilted. He lost track of the faces, the torches, the frantic movements. Someone tried to lift him or possibly shift him to a cloth so they could carry him. More voices clamored. He only remembered the last glimpse, the overhead beams spinning as if the room had turned upside down. Then darkness swallowed him. At some point, he heard a single chanting voice reverberating through the hollow of his mind. Slow, rhythmic phrases in a language older than any kingdom. He sensed the heat of a brazier, a swirl of incense. His eyes refused to open. Even if he tried to will them to part, he felt shackled to unconsciousness by a crushing weight. The chanting rose in intensity, occasionally joined by a second or third voice. It soothed him in a distant way, as though he drifted in a vast ocean of blackness. Was he alive or had he passed beyond? Time lost meaning. The chanting fell away, replaced by a frantic hush, and then came the searing sting of some heated salve pressed to the wounds across his body. The pain jolted him from that dark ocean, forcing a silent scream that never reached his lips. Then he submerged again, sinking into emptiness. He woke to a flicker of awareness. He had no sense of hours, only that his body burned in agony, every nerve ablaze. He could not tell if it was day or night. The slightest shift of his limbs caused a fresh wave of searing pain. A cloth or bandage tugged at the cut across his collar. The taste of blood lingered in his mouth. He tried to lift an arm, but it felt leaden. Voices chanted again. At one point, a sharper, higher voice exclaimed, "He is nearly gone. The breath is shallow. We can do no more." Another insisted, "We will not fail. Our faith compels us. The Lord of Light can restore him." Warm hands pressed to his chest, a scalding sensation that radiated outward, as though the air itself ignited around him. He nearly blacked out. In the swirling darkness, he glimpsed a memory. The moment he had once harnessed arcane forces to quell entire rebellions. Now those same powers felt so distant. A single final thought took shape. "If I die, so be it. The flame, do with me what you will." Then the darkness claimed him once more. Time became a patchwork of fevers and delirium. Snatches of memory flickered. A figure bending over him, pouring a bitter, steaming liquid into his mouth, which made him retch. A narrow bed, with the stench of old blood caked on linen. A swirl of red robes around him, men or women whispering in an ancient tongue. At times he heard them argue about whether it was wise to keep trying. Their words melted into the slow, steady pulse of chanting. Sometimes he felt a warmth so intense it seemed to burn him from within, a raging fever that made him thrash. Other times an arctic chill stabbed at his spine, leaving him trembling uncontrollably. He was dying, or perhaps already lingering in the threshold of death. A faint voice told him to let go. Another urged him to fight. The swirl of confusion was absolute. He neither resisted nor obeyed. He simply existed in the murky boundary between worlds. When at last he stirred again, genuine consciousness tiptoed back. He found himself lying not on the stone floor of the chamber, but on a cot draped with rough blankets. The air smelled of incense and something else, an herbal tang, perhaps. Flickering red candles illuminated the room's walls, revealing shapes of robed figures kneeling near a central brazier. The faint light contoured the folds of their garments, the glint of metal bowls or chalices. No windows. He tried to move, found his body surprisingly still, as if pinned by softness rather than pain. He felt no agony. Instead, a mild ache lingered here and there, but the excruciating stabs of earlier were absent. Confusion welled up. How was this possible? He lifted a hand to his neck. Bandages encased him from collar to shoulder, but as his fingertips probed gently, he expected to find a lethal gash. Instead, he felt new skin under the bandage, tender but unbroken. Shock jolted him upright. That motion alone revealed more bandages across his torso and arms, yet the pain was minimal. He braced for the crippling wave of agony, but it did not come. He breathed rapidly, heart pounding, trying to recall how he ended up here. The last he remembered was that swirling delirium, the chanting, the sense of drifting. Now he was awake, lucid, and against all odds, apparently not dying. A low voice from the far side of the brazier said, "Easy there, do not strain. You've only just returned to the living in full." One of the robed figures stood, approaching slowly, arms folded into deep sleeves. A candle's glow revealed a serious face, marked by the subtle lines of one used to nightly vigils. He recognized the saffron hue of the man's cloak, a style favored by certain red priests who followed the Lord of Light. The man continued softly, "We feared you beyond salvation. The cuts were mortal. Your throat had nearly been severed. Yet the flame in you refused to die. We invoked powers rarely tapped in these halls, but the night overcame that final boundary. The Lord of Light's grace touched you, it seems." Varos found his voice scratchy, raw. He tested it, coughed once, but no blood emerged from his mouth. "Where am I?" He swallowed. Even that motion felt alien, as though his throat had been restitched. Yet there was no dreadful pain. He realized he was in some hidden chamber, presumably part of a temple or a sanctum the red priests might have commandeered. The small space flickered with half a dozen candles. The robed man gestured gently to keep him calm. "You are safe, if that is your question," the priest said. "We took you from the castle's immediate chaos. The queenly figure who found you insisted we do what we must. She gave us leave to bring you here, away from prying eyes. 2 nights have passed since the attempt on your life. You seemed certain to perish, but we refused to let you go easily." Varro swallowed again, pressing a hand to his bandaged throat. "I remember. The blade. Blood everywhere. For shadows in the room. Then blackness. He let out a shaky sigh, half expecting crippling pain in his chest. Nothing came. Did you how? The priest bowed his head, touching the amulet at his neck. We invoke the rites of the Lord of Light, rites seldom practiced outside ancient enclaves. The cost was great, and more than once your heart failed to beat. But the flame was strong in you. Some say your destiny is not yet finished. We served as instruments of that flame, channeling the healing power beyond normal arts. The maesters believed it was hopeless. Yet you lingered near the boundary of life, refusing to cross. Varos let his eyes drift over his arms. He peeled back a corner of a bandage. Underneath was pink, tender skin, but no gaping slash. Another memory flitted by, the assassin's blade rending his side. Now he felt only mild soreness. The impossibility of it hammered him. I should be dead. The words rasped from his throat, prompting a mild cough. The priest offered a slight, enigmatic smile. Yes, you should. But you are not. The candlelight flickered, revealing two more robed priests kneeling by the brazier, their heads bowed. Some ritual had clearly taken place. Another figure stood in the shadows, a woman in a similar red garb, apparently exhausted, eyes half-lidded as if she had not slept. She gave a faint nod. Then a wave of relief washed over Varos. He realized he had not even asked their names. He felt overwhelmed by the knowledge that he was not only alive but healing swiftly from what had been mortal wounds. He tried to rise from the cot, but the priest pressed a hand to his shoulder. Do not push yourself. The new flesh is delicate. Another day of rest, perhaps? Then you may stand. Varos let out a breath, uncertain whether to protest or comply. A swirl of gratitude, confusion, and lingering shock left him speechless. He closed his eyes, letting calm drift over him. Their chanting resumed in soft undertones, almost a lullaby in ancient tongues. He realized, through half-lucid thought, that the world might already be stirring with rumor of his condition. Did the city think him dead? Or did they wait anxiously for news? He hoped no further attacks had erupted. But for now, he was alive, unbelievably so, in the care of red priests who had accomplished a seeming miracle overnight. The day passed in a blur of dozing, waking, hearing fragments of conversation. The priests tended him with potions that soothed the raw tissues of his throat. They changed bandages often, checking the new flesh for any sign of infection. Each time they peeled away the linen, Varos braced for excruciating pain. But though it stung, it did not roar as he had expected. He found the dryness of his mouth and a faint throbbing in his limbs to be the greatest discomfort. The priests insisted he sip a dark infusion laced with herbs that coaxed faster regeneration. They invoked spells quietly, pressing a palm near his injuries, whispering pleas to the Lord of Light. He drifted in and out of a healing slumber, glimpsing sometimes the movement of swirling, candlelit shadows in the small chamber. It was at night, in a quiet hour, that a messenger from outside arrived. Varos overheard one priest telling another, "The Watchers say they cannot keep him hidden much longer. The palace expects word. The Queen inquires daily. The Watchers suspect the last assassin still roams. But he would never guess we brought Varos here." Another priest responded that secrecy had been crucial to ensure no second attempt on Varos's life. That told Varos more than enough. The Red Keep remained on high alert, the guards hunting for the faceless men. Meanwhile, the Red Priests had spirited him away to an undisclosed location in the city's underbelly or possibly in a discreet wing. The candlelit chamber with no windows reinforced the sense of secrecy. He told himself to trust them for now. He had no immediate strength to do otherwise. By dawn of the second day in that sanctuary, he felt strong enough to sit upright fully. A priest assisted him, propping pillows behind him. The throbbing in his side and chest had diminished to a dull ache. The tightness in his throat lingered, but the bandage was smaller now, revealing pink, freshly mended skin. The woman among the priests approached him with a bowl of warm water and a cloth, gently sponging dried blood from his neck. He asked her name in a quiet rasp. "Lena," she answered, smiling kindly. "I am an acolyte who studied healing rites. You nearly perished in my arms the night you were brought in." He wanted to thank her, but words caught in his newly healed throat. Instead, he touched her wrist, offering a silent nod of gratitude. Her eyes glimmered with relief. She told him the ritual had demanded nearly every ounce of their communal faith. The Lord of Light's flame had responded, for reasons beyond mortal ken. A fleeting sense of wonder stirred in Varos's chest. He truly had brushed the threshold of death. Something or someone had pulled him back. That evening, the robed man who first greeted him returned. "You have improved more rapidly than we dared hope," he said, seating himself on a low stool near the cot. "It is as though your body was primed to accept the flame's gift of renewal. Many men suffer lesser wounds yet fail to heal. You, on the other hand, appear nearly whole." He gestured to Varos's side, which had also knitted. Only faint scars remained. "In truth, I have rarely witnessed such a transformation. Even in legends, it is said that a chosen one might mend overnight. But you were grievously cut. No normal man should have survived." Varos slid a hand across his torso, searching for the expected jolt of pain or tightness. There was only a mild tension, easily tolerated. "I can hardly believe it," he said softly, voice still bearing that rough edge from the trauma. "The last thing I recall is a blade against my throat, darkness consuming me. Now I awaken in your hidden corner. It seems I owe you my life." The robed man accepted the thanks with a humble nod. "We but serve as vessels for the Lord of Light. If you have a destiny, he willed that you continue." A pang of memory struck Varos. The cause he served, the watchers in the palace, the expansions he had helped orchestrate in distant lands, the precarious alliances that might unravel if he was presumed dead. "I must find a way to let them know I live," he said, forcing himself upright. But the man cautioned him to remain. "Your presence must remain hidden a little longer. The roads are not yet safe. The assassin's alley might lurk. Let us ensure your body is entirely restored before you venture out. Another day or so. The queen shall be informed discreetly. She can manage the realm's anxieties. Then you can emerge triumphantly." Varos hesitated, but he recognized the sense in that strategy. He dreaded the possibility that if he appeared in a public corridor, half-healed, a second blade might finish what the first started. He pictured the queen's anguished face as he lay dying. He longed to reassure her. But patience was wise. The city roiled with tension, and the red priests here had saved him from the brink of death. Perhaps he owed them deference in how best to proceed. The next morning saw his bandages further reduced. Where once a gaping slash marred his throat, now only an extended scab, already sealed, remained. He rose from the cot with minimal help, steadying himself on shaky legs. The woman, Lena, guided him around the chamber in slow steps, each movement an exercise in careful balance. He found a mild dizziness but no stabbing pain. It felt surreal, as if time had rearranged itself. He brushed a finger over the newly formed scar at his collar. It was tender but firmly closed, no sign of the mortal wound that should have ended him. The red priests watched him with reverent awe. Even they had not expected quite so swift a recovery. By midday, he was walking on his own, albeit with caution, pacing the length of the chamber. Throughout that day, the robed man, who introduced himself as an elder named Saran, explained some of the rites they used. Saran said it was a version of an ancient ritual seldom performed unless someone carried a strong inner flame. "Your aura was unlike most mortals," he confided. "It resonated strongly with the powers we invoked. That is why your wounds knitted so completely. But be mindful. Such a resurrection of tissue is fragile for a short while. Another serious blow might unravel it." Varos listened carefully, mindful that though he felt no more excruciating pain, he might not be ready to wrestle with a dozen assassins. Still, a burning question lingered in his mind: why would they attempt this? "I have threatened no one in the Red Keep." Did these killers truly serve a contract from an external city, or a personal vendetta? The priest had no certain answer. The rumor that they were from the infamous Order of Bravos had circulated widely. "They seemed determined to name you a tyrant," Saran said quietly, "accusing you of plans that overshadow mortal concerns, brandishing steel to end your life. Perhaps someone fearsome placed the contract. The city hunts them still." Varos nodded, letting the conversation close. Later that afternoon, Lena returned with a clean tunic for him to wear, urging him to discard the soiled bandages. He found her gentle presence comforting, though he hardly knew her beyond these few days of convalescence. He asked if the queen had inquired. Lena nodded. "We sent word of your survival. She has not visited in person, likely for secrecy. But she is relieved. Possibly soon you may see her, once we ensure your safety." The city bristles with gold cloaks rummaging every corner, searching for the final assassin if he remains. With that, Varos felt a swell of gratitude and a quiet longing to speak with the queen, to assure her he was all right. He recalled her tear-stained face, her frantic voice as he bled on the floor. Now he stood, unsteady but alive, thanks to these priests' devotion and the strange flame that coursed in his blood. By nightfall, Saran and the other priests decided Varos could meet with a handful of watchers from the castle if they approached discreetly. They prepared a small corner of the chamber with a table and extra candles. A gentle knock on the door our midnight revealed two cloaked figures stepping inside, scanning the space warily. Varos recognized them as watchers loyal to the queen, men known for their silent efficiency. They bowed upon seeing Varos upright, no longer a near corpse. "We bring her regards," one said. "And these tidings. The king has readied squads of men at arms to guard you, if you wish to return to the keep soon." Varos considered it but looked to the priests for advice. They insisted he remain one more night, to let the rituals fully seal the deeper wounds. The watchers accepted that, promising to carry word to the queen that he was stable, near to full health. Before they departed, they relayed a message from the queen herself. She prays for your swift recovery, stands prepared to welcome you whenever you are strong enough. The entire realm has been on edge. Varos felt a wave of warmth, unexpectedly touched by that concern. He offered them quiet thanks. So the next day dawned, and the priests removed the final bandages around his abdomen and arms. He tested each joint, each muscle. The scabs were small, fresh pink lines on his flesh, far from the mortal gashes. Even the slash across his throat, which had nearly severed his windpipe, was now a slender scar, thin as a thread. He could speak with clarity, albeit in a husky tone that might fade over time. He took deeper breaths with no tearing agony, shocking him with how swiftly his body had repaired. The priests performed one last morning ritual around the brazier, chanting prayers of gratitude. Each knelt, praising the Lord of Light for this success. Varos watched them in reflective silence, acknowledging that he, too, owed something more than mundane fortune. Before midday, Saran gave him a set of fresh clothes, a plain tunic and breeches, instructing him to dress and gather his bearings. "You are whole again, though not entirely unbreakable," he cautioned. "Do not leap back into battles. Another savage wound might not yield so readily to the flame. The queen awaits your presence. We have no further reason to hide you away, unless you fear the assassin's blade yet again." Varos responded that he must face the realm, letting them see him alive, or risk rumors of war flaring. Saran nodded, stepping aside. Once Varos was dressed, he tested a few steps, found surprising vigor in his limbs, and gave a short laugh. Just days ago, he was at death's door. Now he felt almost as though he had never been injured at all. It was uncanny, exhilarating, and faintly troubling. They led him through narrow corridors in what seemed to be a seldom-used wing, up a winding staircase, until a small wooden door opened onto a more familiar hallway. Two watchers from the castle stood guard, bowing respectfully at the sight of him. One stepped forward to guide him to where the queen and certain lords awaited. He parted ways with the priests at that threshold, turning to Saran with a sense of profound gratitude. "You saved me. I cannot repay that debt, not in gold or power. But know that should you ever need me, you have but to ask." Saran accepted the vow with humility, reminding him to remember the Lord of Light's blessing. Varos felt a swirl of emotion, quietly determined that once the assassin was found, he might also uncover who funded them. But first, a more immediate task, letting the queen and the realm see that the one they presumed near death was fully healed. He emerged into a broader corridor, recognizable as part of the Red Keep's main structure. Some guards patrolling there widened their eyes, not expecting him to appear so suddenly, and so healthy. One stammered, "We thought you—" "A moment. Let me announce your presence." Varos nodded. Soon enough, the corridor bustled with excitement. Whispers scurried in all directions. The watchers guided him toward a receiving hall, a modest chamber apparently set aside for private gatherings. He braced himself, uncertain how the queen might react, or if the king was present. The door opened onto a scene of half a dozen individuals in subdued conversation. At the center, the queen turned, her expression shifting instantly from tension to stunned relief. She stepped forward, exclaiming, "You stand here with no sign of mortal wound? By the gods, I had not dared hope such a miracle. Are you truly well? Varos inclined his head, voice calm but firm. I am, he answered. My wounds are sealed. I live, though it owes much to the Red Priests. I owe them everything. A hush fell as the others in the room gaped at the utter lack of bandages or crutches. The queen reached out gently, as if to confirm for herself that the bandage at his neck was gone, replaced by faint scarring. No infection, no sign of suppuration. She let out a half-laugh, half-sob of relief. You looked so close to death. I cannot fathom how you stand here, almost unscathed. The realm will rejoice that no more violence must be unleashed. Our watchers suspected you might lie comatose for weeks, if you survived at all. He offered a faint smile. The flame burned in me, I suppose, and the priests performed their highest rites. My body responded. He paused, scanning the others. A handful of watchers, a knight in service to the king, a trusted counselor or two. The queen introduced them quickly. They all expressed variations of amazement. One counselor ventured a soft remark about how perhaps this was a sign. Varos let it pass unremarked, knowing that many might interpret his survival in ways that suited them. Within the hour, word spread through the corridors that Varos, once left bleeding on the floor by 4 assassins, had returned fully healed. Guards posted in corners parted in awe as he walked by, each step firm. No sign of a limp or weakness. The hush of astonishment followed him. He recognized that this might prompt fresh whispers of unnatural power or black arts. Yet at least it dispelled fear that he would die, prompting a wave of vengeance. Instead, the realm's tension might subside, assured that retribution did not hang over them for failing to protect him. Later, he learned that the king himself wanted to see him, so Varos was escorted to a smaller council chamber. Robert sat at a table, half a mug of ale in hand. On spotting Varos, Robert's eyes bulged with something akin to disbelief. You, he said gruffly. I saw your wounds. They were mortal. The floor was a lake of your blood. Now you stride in here as though it was a mere scratch. How in 7 hells is that possible? Varos dipped his head. Majesty, the Red Priests drew me from the brink. I am told I lingered near death for days, but I woke this morning renewed. Robert huffed, set his mug down heavily. So rumor is true. The realm can let out a breath, I suppose. We worried that if you died, your allies might burn half the free cities in wrath. The king paused, then added in a quieter tone. I'm relieved you pulled through. The assassin's accomplice still roams free, we believe, but our hunts continue. We vow to keep searching. You have my word. I've no wish to see a second attempt. Varos accepted that vow, stating he appreciated Robert's men stepping up. In truth, he wondered if the assassin had fled the city or continued lurking. In either case, he felt no special fear. A second attempt, he mused, might be in vain. If the Lord of Light had decided his destiny was not complete, he doubted an assassin's blade would fell him so easily again. Late that evening, as the castle quieted, Varos found himself gazing out a high window, candle in hand, pondering the improbable nature of his survival. The city lights twinkled below. He had parted the band of cloth around his throat, letting the cool air brush the faint scar. If not for the memory of the blade biting into his flesh, he might have believed it was just a scratch. His mind reeled with the sense that something bigger guided him. The Red Priests had told him he carried a unique flame. Perhaps fate indeed had a purpose that demanded he remain alive. He closed his eyes, breathing in the night air, half expecting to see ghosts of those assassins lurking. But no, the corridor behind him stood guarded. He might be safe tonight. Days moved on, and Varos integrated back into the daily rhythms. He participated in measured conversations with watchers, carefully gleaning their progress in searching for the final assassin. He also kept discreet contact with the Red Priests, ensuring no new sabotage threatened him. Each passing sunrise found him stronger, until he realized that not just the immediate injuries but every ache or bruise had vanished. He felt physically fitter than he had in some time. When he tested his range of motion with a short blade in private, he found fluid ease, as if his limbs had shed all weariness. Even his hair, once stiff with dried blood, now was washed clean, shining with renewed vigor. The palace staff who saw him pass in corridors bowed with deeper respect, perhaps suspecting he was either favored by the gods or sustained by uncanny sorcery. Eventually, the day arrived when Varos was summoned to stand in a small audience with the queen, the king, and certain influential figures who wanted an official statement from him regarding the attempt on his life. The watchers guided him to a modest hall where the queen sat at the head of a table, Robert perched to her right, tapping his foot impatiently. A handful of knights and counselors ringed the walls, silent. Varos entered, head high. A flick of surprise passed across several faces. His posture betrayed not a single limp, no sign of lasting injury. Even Robert took note, narrowing his eyes. The queen beckoned him forward. "We gather here," she said calmly, though tension lay under her words, "to address the aftermath of the attempt on your life. We have gleaned that your attackers served the faceless order from Bravos, likely under contract from enemies who fear your role or your presence in these halls. Given your rapid recovery, it seems you wish to continue as normal. The question is, do you demand any official retribution, or do you accept that the realm has done its utmost to protect you?" Varos considered the question. He recognized that most in the realm dreaded that if he demanded vengeance, it could spark conflict. He also recognized the city had tried to find the assassins, though at least one escaped. He took a calm breath and said, "I have no quarrel with the realm's watchers. I do not hold the city or the crown responsible for the infiltration. My personal guards died valiantly, and I regret their loss. As for retribution, I do not plan to unleash destruction upon these walls. My survival alone is testament enough that fate intends me to continue my mission. If the city hunts the final killer, that is well. If he escapes, then I shall remain vigilant. This matter is concluded on my part. I hold no illusions that more conspiracies might arise, but I stand ready." A hush followed, each figure absorbing his words. Robert let out a low grunt, relaxing his shoulders. The queen offered him a small nod of acknowledgement. No demands for scorched earth, then. They would not plunge into chaos because of one near-fatal event. That sense of relief flickered across multiple faces. A counselor ventured, "So you do not require the crown's armies to scour the entire city further, or to enact a blockade on Bravos?" Varos shook his head. "No. The watch can remain at its usual vigilance. If the faceless order lurks, let them fear the watch's pursuit. I do not require an entire campaign. My wounds are healed thanks to the Red Priests, and I am content to move forward." A mild wave of disbelief at his mention of healed overcame the watchers, who remembered the monstrous gashes. But no one contested it. After that audience, Varos found himself free to roam the castle's corridors again. He took short walks through the gardens, ignoring the wide-eyed stares of guards who had believed him near death days ago. He meditated in quiet corners, reflecting on the swirl of fate that had saved him. The Red Priests occasionally approached to ask how he fared. He showed them with small gestures that his body bore no lingering damage. They, too, recognized some extraordinary blessing was at work. The priests bowed in respect, reaffirming that the Lord of Light did not intend for him to perish so soon. Varos accepted their homage with humility, telling them if ever they needed him, they need only call. That sense of destiny clung to him like an invisible mantle. By the week's end, the castle's folk moved on from the immediate shock. Gossip shifted from the attack itself to the wonder of Varos's perfect recovery. Some whispered that he must be a sorcerer who performed dark rites to rebuild his flesh. Others insisted the Red Priests performed a miracle. A few cynics claimed he had only been superficially wounded, that rumors of mortal slashes were exaggerated. He paid no mind to these rumors. He simply carried on, appearing at intervals in the Grand Hall or exchanging mild pleasantries with knights who had once believed him finished. The sense of tension had evaporated each time someone looked at him. They realized no sign of scarring. Even that major slash across his throat was now just a faint line, barely visible unless one stood very close. One afternoon, as he walked along a balcony overlooking the city, the queen found him leaning on the stone railing, gazing at the rooftops. She approached with a quiet step. He turned, offering a small smile. She commented softly, "You stand there, looking as though you were never touched by steel. I still recall the blood that coated the entire floor. It feels surreal." I wanted to say, "I'm glad you remain with us." The realm needed no further tragedy. He bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Your concern means much to me. I regret that my presence caused such a crisis. Yet we see how quickly fate can shift. I remain alive, and the realm stands free of the war that might have erupted had I died in these halls." She studied him carefully, as though trying to see if any part of him was truly wounded deep within. He offered only that calm gaze in return. She asked if he had any pain. He said, "None at all. I believe the Red Priests performed something beyond normal healing. My body feels entirely renewed." She nodded, letting out a sigh of relief, then turned to watch the city below. The pair stood in companionable silence for a time. She eventually murmured, "The assassins who cut you so brutally must have believed your demise certain. If they hear of your perfect recovery, they might be undone by shock themselves." Varos gave a short, gentle laugh. "Perhaps. I hold no illusions that they won't try again if their masters so desire. But for now, let them hide in fear. My watchers, your watchers, none will be caught unprepared next time. And even if they come, I suspect I am not so easy a target. The flame in me is strong, or so the priests say." The queen seemed content with that answer. Eventually, she departed, leaving him to his thoughts. In the days that followed, word reached beyond the capital that Varos had emerged from mortal wounds unscathed. Courtiers and travelers carried the tale to outlying keeps, how the man was found half eviscerated, how the Red Priests performed an impossible rite, how he walked about now in full health. Lords across the land whispered that perhaps the rumors of his arcane powers were true, that he transcended normal mortality. Some called it a sign of sorcery. Others deemed it a divine gift. Meanwhile, the castle watchers ensured Varos's new guards were doubled. They found no sign of the final assassin. A rumor trickled in that he might have slipped out to sea. Another rumor claimed the man was discovered dead by the city outskirts, though nothing was confirmed. In any case, no further attempts occurred. On the 10th morning after Varos's recuperation, he decided to test his body in a private training yard, taking up a wooden practice sword to measure his reflexes. A pair of watchers, uncertain about letting him exert himself, stood aside but ready to intervene if he collapsed. He swung the practice blade in measured arcs, half expecting to find tender spots or stiff muscles. None. He felt as strong and agile as ever. Possibly more. He performed short routines of footwork, each step a testament that he had not lost his physical skills. Next, he clashed lightly with a guard who offered to spar. Each blow that landed on Varos's arms or shoulders caused no recoil of pain. The guard marveled, remembering how less than 2 weeks prior, Varos was at death's door. After a short session, Varos thanked him and parted, satisfied that the Red Priest's healing had indeed made him whole. That evening, a small private feast was held in the Queen's name, an event celebrating that the castle had known 2 weeks of calm after the infiltration. Varos was invited, along with a handful of watchers who aided in protecting him. It was an intimate affair in one of the keep's grand dining chambers, lit by scores of candles. He arrived wearing a simple black tunic, unadorned except for a slight fiery motif stitched at the collar, a subtle nod to the Lord of Light's blessing. The Queen greeted him warmly, introducing him to a few new faces from distant corners of the realm. They all discreetly studied him, as though verifying he truly bore no sign of mortal injury. When dinner commenced, topics ranged from ongoing hunts for hidden threats to mundane developments in the city to speculation about future stability. Varos participated with polite interest, though he found himself carefully avoiding any direct mention of the night he was attacked. Most present, it seemed, wanted to let the matter rest. The Queen was the only one who occasionally cast him glances tinged with unspoken gratitude or relief. Over the meal, a Red Priest arrived from the corridor, evidently one of those who had aided in the ritual, seeking a private word with Varos. The Queen graciously allowed it. The priest pulled Varos aside to a corner of the chamber. In a subdued voice, he explained that a deeper prophecy might be swirling around Varos's miraculous survival. Some believed it signaled a new destiny, that the gods had tested him. Varos listened with tempered patience, acknowledging that he felt changed, though he did not claim any grand prophecy for himself. The priest told him quietly that had he died, a great confusion might have overtaken many who saw him as pivotal. Surviving so perfectly might embolden those who believed in his significance. The priest parted with a cryptic blessing that the flame continues to guide Varos's steps. Varos nodded, returning to the table introspective. The feast concluded with mild toasts. The Queen raised a glass to the continuing peace of these halls and recognized Varos as a living testament that not all tragedies need be final. Robert was absent, apparently preferring to skip quiet affairs for rowdier gatherings. Ned Stark, present at the table, offered Varos a calm congratulations on cheating death. Others echoed that sentiment. Varos accepted with humility, reminding them that the night had cost the lives of his personal guards. The Queen assured him they were honored in the keep's memorial. The conversation turned to lighter topics. By the time Varos left the hall, he felt an odd sense of closure. The chapter of that violent attempt might be sealed. The city no longer braced for him to succumb to mortal wounds, nor for him to unleash fury in retribution. He had returned from the edge, healed in a night by the Red Priests, and with that the darkest specter of vengeance had vanished. During the subsequent week, Varos quietly oversaw final matters in the capital. Some watchers from the Queen aired above the current day, seeing not just this hollow but the entire region. He saw the White Walkers like cold beacons among the swirling snow. They were scattered across the far north, some prowling near the remains of Hardhome, others venturing inland, raising new whites from frozen graves. But one presence dwarfed the rest, a vortex of cold. The Night King. Bran felt that presence brush against his mind, prying. He yanked back, but it was too late. He had already made contact. A whisper of dark recognition threaded through him. The Night King was aware. A swirl of images. The Night King seated on an icy throne in a gloom so deep it seemed to devour all warmth. Frost spiraled from his outstretched hand, forging a spear from living ice. His eyes, that glacial blue, bored into Bran's vantage, as though the barrier of distance and magic was meaningless. A sense of malignant curiosity radiated from the creature. Then, in a flash, the ice storm parted, revealing a great army, tens of thousands strong. The dead marched at the Night King's command. Bran sensed that the ephemeral shield around him was no match for such fury if unleashed. He tried to flee that vision, reorient himself. Then he found himself in another memory. A swirl of silver hair, a woman long ago, tears on her cheeks. A swirl of winter rose, burying that memory. He saw fleeting glimpses of other shapes, people he recognized, Arya, Sansa, Rickon, each face flickering in and out. Then he was pulled to the crypts of Winterfell, where shadows coalesced around statues of the old kings in the north. The stony eyes of each statue glowed faintly, as if alive. Something about that image held a key. Then it was gone, replaced by swirling darkness. He slammed back into his body with a gasp. Pain lanced through his shoulders. He realized he had fallen sideways, pressed against the petrified wood. Mira and Hodder were by his side at once, lifting him upright. Leaf's voice asked, "Brandon Stark, what did you see?" He fought to control his breathing. The Night King knows I'm here." He turned wide eyes to Leaf. "He's raising an army, and I saw glimpses of Winterfell's crypts, as if they hold something. I don't know what it means, but the Night King, he felt me. I'm sure of it." Leaf's expression was grave. "Then we must go, and quickly. If he knows you are here, he may come for you. This place is no longer safe." Bran's head spun. "But we came all this way for answers. Did I get them? What did you learn?" Leaf pressed. "What was revealed to you?" Bran tried to recall the swirl of images, but they were already slipping away like half-forgotten dreams. The crypts of Winterfell. I keep seeing them. Something about the statues, and a power hidden there or a legacy. The Targaryens had their dragons, the children have their magic. But the Starks, I don't know." He shivered. "All I know is it felt important." Leaf nodded slowly, her gaze flicking to the petrified trunk. "Then perhaps you must return to Winterfell to find what you seek." Mira's eyes widened. "Return? That's hundreds of miles south. And we don't know who holds Winterfell now. Last I heard, the Boltons," she trailed off, lips pressed tight with distaste. "They all knew the rumors that Roose Bolton and his bastard son, Ramsay, had seized the castle in the chaos of war." Bran felt a surge of desperation. "We can't let them stop us. If something in the crypts can help us defeat the White Walkers, I have to try." Leaf considered, her demeanor calm yet urgent. "Then that is your path. But you cannot do it alone. We will guide you back through the hidden ways, some of them extend beyond the wall. But once we are close to Winterfell, we children cannot linger. We are bound to the deep forests, and the wards we keep cannot protect us there." Bran nodded, though his mind reeled. To return to Winterfell, the place where his father was once lord, where his own tragic journey began, it felt like an impossible dream. But the memory of that vision compelled him onward. And now that the Night King had sensed his presence, he feared that staying in the far north put Leaf and the remaining children in grave peril. "All right," he agreed, voice trembling with adrenaline. "We go." Leaf pressed her tiny hand to his. Then quickly, "The others will not stand idle." She motioned to Moss and Ember, who nodded in unison. The small party wasted no time. Hodder scooped Bran up and they left that hollow as stealthily as they had arrived, the petrified trunk looming behind them like a silent sentinel. Bran cast one last glance at it, wondering if he had missed something, some final clue in the runes. But there was no time. Already a bitter wind was rising. The swirl of snow had turned furious, as if the land itself resented their intrusion. Or perhaps it was the White Walkers summoning the storm. They pressed on, returning to a series of underground passages that Leaf swore would lead them closer to the wall's southern side, through caverns known only to her people. It was a long, winding route. At times, they had to trudge single file through damp tunnels that reeked of old earth and slick moss. At others, they emerged in valleys thick with pine and spruce, shadows lengthening in the moonlight. Bran dozed fitfully on Hodder's back, swirling in and out of half-dreams, but never quite letting himself slip fully into a green-seeing trance. He did not dare risk further contact with the Night King. One night, as they huddled in a low cavern to rest, Leaf and Mira hunched over a small, smokeless fire, discussing the path ahead. Bran listened quietly. The plan was to skirt the wall using an ice cave that might lead under its foundations, far from Castle Black or Eastwatch, but near some rumored breach. Leaf was certain that her forebears had once used it, though centuries had passed. Bran recalled Samwell Tarly once speaking of hidden passages in the wall's base, but that had been secondhand. The enormity of the wall itself seemed daunting, but Leaf's confidence gave him hope. They had come so far already, and the alternative, trying to pass through a castle gate held by men who might not understand or believe them, felt more dangerous. Still, Bran's heart yearned to know if Jon Snow was somewhere near the wall, or already beyond it. They had not the luxury to send a raven or attempt to find him. The realm was vast and time was short, so they pressed on day after weary day. The nights blended into each other. The further south they traveled, the less biting the wind, though it still carried the chill of winter's approach. For all the hardships, Leaf seemed resolute, Moss and Ember stoic. Mira kept her vigilance, forever scanning the horizon, javelin at the ready. Hodder bore Bran without complaint, though the bigger man sometimes grumbled in a half-lost dialect. Bran tried to remain alert, to sense if the White Walkers were near, but no attacks came. The nights remained ominously quiet, as if the others were busy elsewhere, or biding their time. Eventually, they found the cave Leaf had spoken of, a narrow fissure in a cliffside near the eastern reaches of the wall. Stalactites of ice dripped from the opening, forming jagged spears. It looked foreboding, but Leaf insisted it led beneath the wall's foundations, re-emerging south of that colossal barrier of stone and ice. Cautiously, they entered. The path inside was cramped, forcing them to step carefully around half-frozen pools of water. Drips echoed in the darkness. Leaf carried a single faintly glowing bit of moss to guide the way, but mostly they advanced by feeling the walls. Mira carried a hooded lantern with an oil wick turned low, just enough to keep them from stumbling into crevasses. As they descended deeper, the air became sharply cold, almost suffocating. Bran felt Hodder tremble. For a moment, he worried that the big man would panic in these claustrophobic conditions, but Mira whispered soothing words. They continued on. Leaf paused frequently, pressing a hand to the icy walls, as though sensing for danger. At one point, she halted abruptly. Her eyes narrowed, and she signaled for silence. Bran's heart pounded. Then they heard it. A distant scraping, or perhaps a shuffling movement beyond the ice. Moss and Ember exchanged worried glances. The tunnel was too narrow for a fight. They waited, breath held, until the noise ceased. Eventually, Leaf motioned them onward. The tension was palpable. If a White or White Walker lurked here, they had nowhere to run. But luck, or the gods, seemed to favor them this night, for no enemy emerged. Slowly, painstakingly, they pressed deeper until the cold relented somewhat, and the ice receded. The tunnel twisted upward. After countless hours, they saw a faint glow of daylight filtering through a collapsed portion of stone. Leaf squinted at it, then beckoned them closer. They emerged, blinking in the pale morning sun, onto a small slope covered by pine needles and dusted with snow. Ahead of them, the forest stretched southward. Behind them, the wall soared, a dizzying mass of ice and stone. They were on the south side. Bran felt relief flood him, and Mira gave a shaky laugh, though the weight of fatigue pressed on them all. "We made it," Mira breathed, looking to Leaf. "Thank you." Leaf inclined her head, but her expression held a hint of sadness. "My journey with you must soon end. We cannot go too far from the old places, or our strength will fade." Bran nodded, expecting this. "We're grateful for everything you've done. How far will you come with us?" "Far enough to set you on a path to Winterfell. Then we must part. Our numbers are too few now to risk further. You will not be alone, though. The weirwoods watch over you, and your own gifts grow stronger by the day." Bran swallowed, torn between gratitude and anxiety. "Thank you. I wish we didn't have to say goodbye, but I understand." Leaf placed a small hand on his shoulder. "We are always with you, Brandon Stark. Though unseen, the children remain in the roots of the world, in the green dreams. If ever you have dire need, call on us. We will answer if we can." Bran nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I will." They continued south through thick woods, forging a path that avoided major roads. The land here was stark but more hospitable than the far north. They saw occasional signs of life, smoke rising from distant huts, footprints of hunters in the snow. But they kept away from strangers, uncertain who might be friend or foe. After a few days, Leaf paused at a certain clearing where the trees thinned. Beyond lay a dirt path winding toward a small settlement. According to the children, that settlement lay several leagues west of the King's Road. Winterfell was further south, a journey still of many days or a few weeks. "This is where we part," Leaf said softly. Moss and Ember stood behind her, each bowing their head to Bran, Mira, and Hodder in turn. Bran felt a lump in his throat. "Will we see you again?" Leaf smiled gently. "In your dreams, perhaps." She stepped forward, took Bran's hand in hers. "We have faith in you, Brandon Stark. Carry our hope with you. The White Walkers can be resisted. You proved that at Hardhome. Do not falter. Your path leads you to Winterfell. May your gods and ours grant you strength." She retreated, and the three children slipped back into the embrace of the forest, like phantoms made of leaves and bark. In moments, they were gone. Bran stared after them, feeling both loneliness and resolve. At last, Mira touched his arm. "Bran," she said gently, "we should go." He nodded. Hodder lifted Bran again, and they followed the dirt path in the direction Leaf had indicated. They traveled quietly, hearts heavy with the new responsibility. The journey's next leg would be dangerous. Bolton men might roam these lands. Anyone could be an enemy. But Bran clung to the vision that had guided them south, the crypts beneath Winterfell, an ancient secret that might hold the key to defeating the White Walkers once and for all. They pressed on day by day, forging deeper into the North's inhabited lands. The snow eased at times, revealing patches of dead grass, though the air remained chilly. They avoided the main roads, stealing around farmsteads at night, scrounging for what little supplies they could find without drawing attention. Mira caught rabbits when she could, using her skill with the spear and traps. Bran, for his part, tried to keep his green sight in check, lest the Night King latch onto him again. Yet in the quiet moments of rest, Bran glimpsed faint flickers. He dreamed of wolves prowling the outskirts of Winterfell's walls, of whites shambling in the far distance, of crows perched on broken ramparts. He tasted the tension in the air. War was everywhere, not just with the others. Men warred with men, houses contending for the Iron Throne. But the greatest threat of all loomed in the deep cold, and they were nearly blind to it. Once, in the hush of night, Bran reached out to see if he could sense Jon Snow's presence. He found only vague impressions, a cluster of black-clad men in a fortress of gloom and cold. He thought perhaps Jon was in Castle Black, but he could not be certain. The images were scattered, as though the god there was weakened by strife. He wondered if Jon had already departed south with the wildlings, or if some new trouble had ensnared him. Without more training, more focus, Bran could not say. But he prayed Jon still lived and that his warning might have reached the leaders of the realm. Weary day followed weary night, until at last they stood within sight of Winterfell's old watchtowers, glimpsed from a rise in the rolling terrain. Bran's heart lurched at the sight. It was home. Yet the sight was jarring. Parts of the walls had been rebuilt after being put to the torch. He saw the thick banners of House Bolton drooping in the cold air. Mira's face hardened. So they do hold it. Bran nodded, swallowing fear. We can't just ride up to the gates. But we need to get into the crypts. How? Mira asked. Bran closed his eyes, recalling the labyrinth of passages and tunnels beneath the castle. He'd roamed them as a child, though some were now collapsed or blocked. There might be an entrance from outside, he said quietly, near the old collapsed section of the wall. My father once mentioned smugglers' tunnels, or at least rumored passages. If we can find one that leads to the crypts, we can slip in. A daunting plan, but they had few choices. By day, Bolton patrols might spot them. So they waited until nightfall, hiding among skeletal trees. Then, under the cover of darkness, they crept closer to the castle's perimeter. The walls loomed ominously, lit by torches spaced at intervals. They saw men on the ramparts. Hounds barked somewhere in the distance. Bran directed them around the southern side, where a portion of the walls had once been shattered during the Ironborn occupation. It had since been repaired, but the ground might still hold hidden cracks. They searched carefully along the base, stepping over rubble and frozen patches of earth. Mira tested the ground with her spear, hoping to find a hollow spot. At last, near a half-buried foundation stone, they discovered a narrow fissure that seemed to open into darkness beneath the fortress. The gap was small, but with some effort, they might widen it enough to squeeze through. They worked quietly, using a small dagger to pry loose stones. Each scrape echoed in Bran's ears, but the night was windy and it masked their noise. Hodder grunted softly, anxiety plain in his eyes. After what felt like an eternity, they cleared enough space. Mira slid in first, lantern unlit to avoid detection. A moment later, she called back softly. It opens into a passage. Come on. Hodder carefully maneuvered Bran through, then squeezed in himself. The air inside smelled of damp earth and old rot. They crawled for several yards before the passage widened into a low corridor. The floor was uneven, strewn with debris. Mira crouched, guiding them slowly forward in pitch darkness. She dared not light the lantern unless they were certain they were out of sight of any guards. They advanced in near silence, the only sound their ragged breathing. At times, Hodder whimpered, but Bran patted his arm reassuringly. Step by step, they descended deeper into the bowels of Winterfell. Eventually, they heard the soft drip of water. Bran smelled the musty odor of old stone walls, recognized it from his childhood explorations. His heart pounded. He was back. Not as the boy who climbed towers, but as a cripple-turned mystic carrying a burden far heavier than any child should bear. If the Boltons found him, they would likely kill him or use him as a pawn. But the crypts called, and he knew he had to answer. At a bend, Mira finally risked lighting the lantern, shielding its glow with her hand. The flickering light revealed an arched corridor of stone with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. In one direction, the corridor sloped upward, likely leading into the main castle. The other direction descended. Bran gestured that way. They moved quietly, the corridor growing colder and damper with each step down. The crypts. Bran felt an eerie familiarity, recalling how he had once come here with Rickon in search of Ned's bones. Torch brackets along the walls were empty, rusted. The silence was oppressive. At last, they emerged into a larger chamber lined with stone pillars. The shapes of old Stark kings and lords loomed in the darkness, each statue seated with a stone dire wolf at its feet. Bran's breathing hitched. He recognized the statues from memory, the crypt guardians each holding a sword across its lap. But many of those swords had rusted away, leaving the stone figures seemingly unarmed. They were alone in the gloom. The only sound was the faint drip of water and their own breaths. Mira turned slowly, shining the lantern's weak light on the rows of ancient tombs. "We're here," she whispered, her voice echoing. Bran could feel something stirring in his chest, a resonance with these old bones, these old spirits. The crypts were said to be the resting place of all the Stark lords, going back generations. Something in them might be tied to the old magic, to the secret of how to defeat the Night King. He closed his eyes, letting his mind drift. "I need to sense it," he said. "There's something here. Leaf said we might find an answer." Mira nodded and set the lantern on a ledge, turning it down to a faint glow. "We'll stand watch. Hodder, stay with Bran." "Hodder," said the big man, stepping behind Bran protectively. Bran slowed his breathing, reached out with that green-seeing sense. The crypts felt more alive than he expected, humming with echoes of the past. If the weirwood trees were the eyes of the old gods, then these crypts were the memory of House Stark. The stone statues seemed to shift in the lantern's flicker, as if they moved in the corner of his vision. But it was not literal movement, it was something deeper, intangible. A wave of cold washed over him. He suddenly felt as though he stood among the statues, not physically but in spirit. Their eyes turned to him, each carved face austere, silent, demanding. Bran heard a distant voice whisper, though he could not place its source, "The dead keep their secrets." "What do you seek?" Bran swallowed. "A way to stop the White Walkers," he whispered into the darkness. "I saw a vision that said the crypts might hold something." The silence stretched. Then, gradually, one statue's eyes seemed to gleam, the statue of a Stark lord so ancient his name was lost. The gleam was ephemeral. Unity. Else I might let them drown in the dark. But we shall attempt guidance first. Her posture remained on her knees, tears shining in the corners of her eyes. The sunset's final rays angled through a gap in the broken ceiling, illuminating the two figures, the Red Priestess kneeling before a man who claimed to be and felt like a living god. The ruin's altar, half-cracked, glowed faintly as though responding to an invisible presence. Varos placed a hand lightly atop Melisandre's head, an ancient gesture of benediction. She swallowed, heart-thrumming, half in fear, half in devotion. "I vow to serve, my lord. I shall go forth, gather the faithful, prepare them for your ultimate unveiling. If the so-called Night King was but a fraction, the realm must learn vigilance." He withdrew his hand, letting her stand. In that moment, a gust of wind stirred across the ruin, rattling loose stones. The dragon perched near an outer wall, quiet but watchful, as if it, too, sensed the heightened presence in the air. Varos closed his eyes for a moment as though listening to the pulses of the world. Then, opening them, he nodded to her. "Time moves swiftly. Already I sense a new stirring of power in distant wastes. Let us not linger. You remain here as you see fit or journey onward to do your priestly tasks. I shall continue writing that I might see the corners of this land. The day will come soon enough when I must gather men to face the real war. Then all illusions will shatter." She stepped back, glancing at his face. "Will you reveal your true nature to the lords? Or keep this a secret until the final hour?" He paused, lips forming a thoughtful line. "A secret for now. Men would recoil in disbelief or brand me a heretic. Even the queen I might trust, but not yet. I need no immediate coronation or idolization. Let them see me as a traveler of arcane gifts. Let them not discover the deeper truth until the threat demands it." She nodded, letting out a soft sigh. Her eyes still shone with the wonder of it all. Then, with a last bow, she said, "Then I will heed your instructions, gather the faithful, and hush, spread the warnings. I remain your servant, my lord of light." He turned away toward the opening in the ruins wall where Scourge awaited. Melisandre followed him a few steps, but he raised a hand in farewell. She watched as he climbed onto the dragon's flank. The beast stirred, letting out a rumble that shook loose pebbles from the decrepit walls. Melisandre shielded her eyes as Scourge launched skyward in a thunderous gust, wings beating heavily. In heartbeats, they had vanished into the sky's fading purple. She remained alone in the ancient ruin, the altar behind her, the night overhead, her mind aflame with revelation. He was the very deity she had served, walking in mortal guise. The notion staggered her, yet she felt an electric purpose surging in her veins. She dropped to her knees at the altar, weeping tears of awe, her voice a soft quake. "I have seen my god. He walks the land. We must be ready." Varro soared away, letting the dragon's flight carry him northward. Each powerful wingstroke cut through the twilight. The air turned cooler as they gained altitude. He reflected on his conversation with Melisandre. The sense of unveiling a portion of his true self stirred him. He wondered how the realm would react if they discovered the man they had known was no mere mortal. For now, he had to tread carefully. The second long night approached, a cosmic war overshadowing mortal imaginations. Let men remain lulled a moment longer, forging alliances in ignorance. When the time came, he would gather them or perhaps judge them unworthy. But no reason to so panic prematurely. A swirl of half-forgotten memories tugged at him, visions of an eternal winter, undead legions unstoppable, a far deeper menace than the so-called White Walkers the realm overcame. He felt certain that the realm had witnessed only a fraction of the horrors that might come. He set his jaw, heart pounding with renewed purpose. In the days that followed, he visited various pockets of the kingdom, always descending only for brief spells. He avoided major castles where the lords might mount an anxious reception or try to keep him pinned in diplomatic affairs. Instead, he explored quiet roads, lone shrines, or remote hamlets, gleaning a sense of the land's pulse. The peasants, seeing a single dragon land, sometimes scurried for cover or locked doors. He would speak calmly to a few brave souls, assuring them no harm. Word spread that a solitary rider on a huge dragon was roving the countryside, but he demanded no tribute nor inflicted any cruelty. Some rumored him a wandering sorcerer, others a sign from the gods. Varos gleaned that these rumors did not matter so long as panic did not spark. He kept each stay short, then moved on, scanning for hints of arcane significance, ancient runes, or lost altars reminiscent of the ruin where he found Melisandre. After a week, he ventured deeper into the north, crossing the wide land of rolling hills that eventually gave way to stonier terrain. The chill of northern winds greeted him, though summer lingered. Scourge seemed content in flight, but the beast demanded large hunts for sustenance, so occasionally Varos let him hunt large game near wooded areas. He tried not to trouble villagers, guiding the dragon to remote valleys for feeding. At night, nestled among pines or rocky outcrops, Varos sometimes recalled the labyrinth of illusions that the realm believed about the ended war. The so-called Night King had been a dire foe indeed, but if it was just a fraction, how easily men had grown complacent. He wondered if Jon Snow or Daenerys might be prepared for the greater threat. He told himself that time would reveal it. Eventually, near the fringes of the far north, he encountered a solitary structure perched on a hill, an old watchtower battered by the elements. He sensed a flicker of Lawler's presence, albeit faint. Perhaps an outpost of some red priest. He landed carefully, the dragon's presence flattening shrubs around the tower's base. From the battered doorway emerged a single-robed man, face half-shadowed by a hood, no threat or hostility. Varos recognized the red color. The man bowed respectfully, apparently having heard tales of a traveling dragon rider. Varos approached, inquiring if the man had news of anything unusual in these parts. The man shook his head, explaining he mostly kept vigil for signs of undead or monstrous occurrences. Nothing had stirred since the White Walkers had been vanquished. Varos withheld mention of the deeper truths about new horrors. Instead, he parted ways politely, gleaning no immediate leads. The watchtower's occupant gave him a blessing in the name of the Lord of Light, but Varos gently said nothing of the man's ignorance. He continued on. He roamed for more days, feeling the tug to keep traveling, though not sure what he sought. One late afternoon, in a rugged stretch of foothills, he came upon a half-buried shrine door set into a rocky cliff face. Intrigued, he dismounted, letting Scourge rest in a small clearing. The door's timbers were rotted, the symbol of a flame partially eroded by centuries of wind and rain. Cautiously, he entered. A narrow passage led into darkness. He summoned a small orb of conjured light between his palms, an easy feat for him, though mortals would call it potent sorcery. The corridor sloped downward to a small underground chamber. The walls bore inscriptions in a language reminiscent of old Valyria, yet older still. Varos's eyes glowed faintly red, scanning each symbol. He read references to a rising dawn and 10 shadows of ice, a reference that resonated with his earlier knowledge. So it was not just myth. He spent an hour in that chamber, deciphering the half-crumbling text. It confirmed that the first wave of undead was never the final war. The text spoke of a deeper cosmic war that required a being of fire incarnate to rally the living. He exhaled a slow breath, heart pounding with recognition. Emerging back into the twilight, he found Scourge snorting impatiently. He patted the dragon's flank, lost in thought. If the ancients also foresaw the existence of 10 shadows of ice beyond the single White Walker menace, then the realm truly stood on the cusp of unimaginable crisis. Let the realm remain ignorant for now, though. He would gather knowledge, gather pockets of faithful. The second long night loomed, a test of men's unity or cowardice. He soared southward again, though not toward the capital. The impulse that guided him urged him to circle the land, glimpsing the shape of each region. He saw farmland recovering from war, peasants content with fleeting peace. He saw lords hosting small harvest festivals, unmindful of deeper threats. He came upon devout folk building small altars to the 7 or other gods, none suspecting a giant new wave of undead that might wash over them. For 2 weeks, he roamed in arcs, sometimes alighting near remote hilltops, other times simply glimpsing from the sky. Each night, he felt the throbbing truth in his chest, that he was not mortal alone, that the flame in his veins carried a cosmic weight. The memory of telling Melisandre that he was the Lord of Light incarnate reverberated within him. He recognized it as truth. Perhaps in an earlier life, he had existed purely as intangible flame or cosmic will, choosing a mortal form for reasons not fully clear. Or perhaps the synergy of the Red Priest's healing had awakened that primal identity. He told himself that he would unravel the details in time. At last, nearing the end of his travels, he decided to revisit the site where he had revealed himself to Melisandre. The notion tugged at him, curious if she lingered there still. So he guided Scourge across the plains, navigating by memory. After a day's flight, He saw the crumbling black stone ruin in the distance. The sight loomed under a reddening sunset. He circled once overhead. No sign of Melisandre or others. He landed in the same clearing outside the half-collapsed walls, dismounted and ventured within. The altar still stood. The earlier hush remained, but there was no sign of the Red Priestess's presence. Footprints indicated she had departed. He felt a pang of mild disappointment, though not surprise. She was likely fulfilling the mission he had given her. Gather devout followers, prime them for an eventual unveiling. He roamed about the ruin in silence, recalling how he declared himself the living God. So direct, yet it felt right in that moment. He let out a slow breath, placing a palm on the cold stone of the altar. Beneath his hand, the stone seemed to warm, a subtle sign of his power. He muttered a quiet vow that he would shape the realm's destiny, ensuring men did not remain complacent. The second long night threatened a horror overshadowing any illusions of safety. Let men cling to illusions if they must, but he would be ready. This vow stirred in his chest, reaffirming the sureness that he had not survived mortal slashes by chance. He parted from the altar, stepping outside. The wind had picked up, whistling across the rubble. He looked to the sky, the final flecks of orange fading into purple, stars peaking. Scourge huffed at the clearing, as though impatient to continue. Varos mounted with renewed resolve, deciding to return eventually to the capital or to some seat of power, but on his terms. Thus, he soared away from that ruin at twilight, circling wide. In the distance, forested hills melted into deeper shadows. He had gleaned what he needed. The realm was a tapestry of calm. The seeds of future confrontation waited, unseen. He would not rest until he had seen men prepared. Whether that meant forging alliances or letting them face the darkness, he had yet to finalize. For now, he rode the night winds, the cold air stinging his cheeks, the massive dragon exhaling plumes of warm breath. If the world believed him a mortal champion or some wandering sorcerer, so be it. He alone knew the deeper truth: a living god walked among them. The nights to come would reveal whether men embraced or resisted that flame. One day, the final test would arrive, the wave of ice overshadowing the old war. He carried within him the cosmic answer to it. The stars glittered overhead, ancient and silent, as Varos steered Scourge into the starlight, forging his path onward through the realm that knew him not. He soared until well past midnight, eventually descending near a serene lake ringed by tall pines. There, he made a quiet camp, letting Scourge drink from the lake. The moon's reflection shimmered on the black water. Varos felt no exhaustion, as though his newly mended body thrummed with infinite energy. Even so, he found a patch of grass to settle upon, leaning against the dragon's flank for warmth. He gazed at the moon's pale glow, letting memories swirl, the sudden slash of a blade in his chambers, the delirious laughter as he lay in a sea of blood, the red priests chanting him back from the brink, the swirl of his own eyes flaring with cosmic red light as he told Melisandre who he truly was. Now that he was alone under the moon, he felt the magnitude of it more keenly. A sense of unstoppable determination welled in his core, as though the entire world was but a stage for him to reshape. That thought might have daunted a lesser man, but he found it oddly comforting. He closed his eyes, letting the world fade. When dawn arrived, he would keep traveling, keep absorbing every nuance of the land he intended to unite or judge. Across days, he made a broad circuit, flying north near the edges of the realm, skirting well around the major lords' seats. On occasion, from a high vantage, he glimpsed distant holdfasts and decided not to descend, not wishing to cause uproar. Instead, he landed in lonely fields or rugged mountainsides, sometimes finding traces of old shrines or partial altars to the Lord of Light. It amazed him how the faith had echoes in these corners. Most common folk worshipped the seven or the old gods, but scattered enclaves of lawless faithful lingered. None were as elaborate as the site where he had encountered Melisandre, yet it confirmed that a foundation existed. The future war might have devout hearts to rally. One crisp morning, near the edge of a broad moorland, he spotted smoke rising from a small settlement. The houses were modest, lined around a communal well. He decided to land at a safe distance, behind a ridge. Then he walked in on foot, leaving Scourge hidden from direct view. As he entered the settlement, a handful of peasants froze in alarm. They recognized him as a stranger with an otherworldly aura. His scar was visible at the throat, but no trace of healing scabs marred him. He greeted them politely, asking if they had seen any sign of suspicious travelers. They shook their heads. He explained in vague terms that a dangerous assassin might roam the land. The peasants offered no leads. They were more concerned about local bandits or famine. Compassion stirred in Varos's heart. He realized that talk of a coming monstrous war would only terrify these folk. So he pressed a few coins into a woman's hand, telling her to buy more feed. She stammered thanks. He spent a short time listening to their woes, a shortage of seeds, an upcoming winter that might prove harsh. He offered them general comfort, saying that in time a greater guidance might come to protect the realm. They gazed at him with puzzlement. Then he left, returning to Scourge. Such small glimpses of mortal fragility reminded him how unprepared the common folk were for cosmic threats. In the final stretch of his journey, he turned back south, letting the rolling hills pass beneath. The air warmed again. His path took him near scattered hills that gave way to gentle farmland. By now, rumor of a traveling man on a giant dragon had spread, so some shepherds recognized him from a distance and did not flee, though they watched warily. He did not linger, pressing on until he reached an old fort near a winding river, deserted for decades. Beneath the fort, he discovered a hidden crypt containing more inscriptions referencing a greater war of ice beyond the known White Walkers. More confirmation that the ancients expected a second or third wave. He felt renewed conviction that the realm's leaders had been lulled into false security by the defeat of one major threat. The real question, how soon would the next wave arrive, and would the realm unify or bicker? If the latter, he might have to forcibly unify them or watch them drown in an endless night. Throughout these days, he found no direct sign of the assassin who might have escaped in the capital. If the killer lurked anywhere, it was hidden behind cunning disguises. Yet Varos felt no personal fear. His sharpened senses told him no immediate threat loomed. He suspected the killer might have fled the realm entirely once he realized Varos lived. That was enough. Let that misguided attempt fade into the past. Varos's eyes were on the future war. At length, he felt he had gleaned all he needed from these lonely wanderings. He decided to return to the capital or somewhere near, presumably to share his findings with those who should hear. He turned Scourge's flight path eastward, covering leagues and hours. On the final day's flight, as he soared across a wide river plain, memory of Melisandre's kneeling form replayed in his mind. The fervor in her eyes when he said, "I am your god, come to unite this world." He felt the deep resonance of that statement. The realm had not seen the fullness of his nature yet, but the day would come. The Song of Ice and Fire was not concluded. The so-called Night King had been but a herald, not the final enemy. War would come in unstoppable waves, and he would stand as the living flame. He landed at night outside the city's outskirts. The capital's lights shimmered in the distance. He chose a secluded meadow near a small lake. He realized he might re-enter the capital with caution, as the Watchers might scramble if they saw the giant dragon approach unannounced. Possibly Daenerys or Jon had told them to remain calm if he returned. He set up a simple camp once more, letting Scourge rest. The next morning, a small band of King's men on patrol found him there, recognized him, and escorted him back. It was an anticlimactic arrival compared to his departure. The gates opened, some Watchers parted, and Varos stepped inside the familiar walls on foot, leaving Scourge in a safer, open field outside the gates. The city folk murmured about his reappearance, but it caused no great commotion. So concluded his wandering tour of the realm. He carried fresh knowledge, altars referencing deeper horrors, peasants unready for cosmic battles, a second wave of White Walkers overshadowing the old war. He had encountered no major resistance, only the uneasy stares of those who glimpsed his dragon overhead. When he entered the Red Keep's corridors, some knights or servants recognized him with surprise. He was not the same battered figure who had left weeks prior. He walked with a new serenity, as though the final puzzle pieces had settled in his mind. Ned Stark, informed of his return, greeted him near the throne room, relieved to see no new strife followed. Ned asked politely if Varos had gleaned anything from his travels. Varos gave a noncommittal smile, saying only that he saw the realm's quiet corners and the scars left by past wars. No mention of the deeper revelations about the second long night. Ned guessed Varos was holding something back, but did not pry. Robert, once he heard Varos was back, sent a messenger summoning him to a private session. Possibly the king wanted to ensure Varos wasn't stirring new chaos. Varos complied politely. Their meeting was brief. Robert demanded to know if Varos had caused any panic with that monstrous dragon. Varos assured him he had kept a low profile. Robert grunted, seemingly satisfied, told him not to vanish so abruptly next time. Varos offered a mild shrug in acceptance. That evening, Varos found a quiet corner of the keep, the same small courtyard where he had parted with Daenerys and Jon previously. He saw them approach, each wearing relieved smiles. Jon teased that Ned had dreaded a wave of chaos from his free-roaming dragon. Daenerys asked if Varos had found anything of note. He answered in general terms about old shrines, no major threats, let them remain at peace. She studied him, sensing a deeper shift in his aura, but said nothing. In her mind, it was enough that he returned unharmed. The memory of him nearly dying in a puddle of blood haunted her. Now he appeared more certain than ever, no sign of leftover wounds. At midnight, Varos slipped out alone to the keep's highest balcony, letting the moonlight bathe him. He whispered a private vow in some ancient tongue that the realm would soon learn the truth. He had gleaned from altars and runes that the next wave of ice overshadowed anything men had faced. He alone, as the living god, would guide them or watch them fall. For now, though, men slept in illusions of safety. He decided to let them rest. The presence of that unstoppable winter might be months, years away, but it was inevitable. As he gazed at the moon, he recalled telling Melisandre this war is not done and letting her see him for who he was. He pictured her fervent eyes, the trembling awe in her voice. She would be his voice among those who served the flame in secret corners. She would sow warnings, gather the devout, prime them for the final call. He had come full circle from near-death in the keep, revived by red priests in a single night, to traveling the corners of Westeros, seeking confirmations that the White Walkers were only a fraction of the threat. Now he returned, scars vanished, mind resolute. Soon he might reveal more to Daenerys or Jon to ensure they stood ready. But not yet. The realm would not embrace the news calmly. He parted from the balcony, descending the shadowy corridors to his assigned chamber. Guards saluted him, though warily. He was, after all, the man rumored to be unstoppable, the mortal who had walked away from a half-severed throat. In his room, he kindled a single candle, letting the flame dance on the wick. He stared into it, eyes flickering red with a quiet energy. He murmured almost in prayer, let them rest a bit longer. The first wave was but a trial. The real darkness lies in the cold corners, stirring. I shall be the flame that decides their fate. The candle flame wavered as though acknowledging his vow. The next morning, life in the keep would resume, banquets, court sessions, minor intrigues. They might never suspect the cosmic drama swirling in Varos's heart. But the truth was there, he was no mere man, for the Lord of Light's presence coursed in his blood. And soon enough, the realm's illusions of lasting peace would crumble before the second long night. On that day, they would discover exactly who Varos was, the god they had prayed to in Lawlor's name, walking among them, ready to unify or judge, carrying the knowledge that the so-called Night King was a mere herald, not the final enemy. Thus the nights went on. Varos roamed the Red Keep's corridors in unhurried steps, greeting servants who shyly bowed, exchanging cordial nods with watchful knights. He found fleeting amusements in short, polite dinners with certain lords, listening to their chatter about local feuds or minor taxes. None suspected the deeper churn in his mind. He would remain here for a short time, quietly waiting for the swirl of destiny to direct him anew, sure in the knowledge that when the unstoppable threat truly arrived, he would stand at the center, no longer content to be a quiet champion. He was the living deity men claimed to worship, and in the final confrontation he would reveal the fullness of that truth. For now, though, he walked among them, scars erased, mortal injuries undone in a single red night, the faint red glow in his eyes occasionally flickering at the edge of vision. He listened to the hush of men's illusions, preparing to shatter them when the storm came. Varos had settled into a solitary rhythm of travel, forging a path through the realm on the back of his towering dragon. Though fully healed from the once fatal wounds he had suffered, a faint line of newly formed flesh still ran across his throat, a pale reminder of the attempt on his life. By all accounts, it should have left him dead, yet the Red Priests had coaxed him back from death in a single night of arcane rites. Now he wandered, compelled by forces even he could not fully articulate, drawn to obscure corners of the land. This was no casual sightseeing. There was in him a sense of urgent searching, an intuition that something more dire than the previous battles with the undead still lurked beyond mortal sight. The notion of a greater wave of White Walkers beyond the so-called Night King gnawed at him. He could feel, in his bones, that the threat remained. It was not only memory or rumor, it was a tangible pressure in the air, a whisper in the currents of magic he attuned to. He seldom stopped in large towns, wary that his arrival astride such a fearsome dragon would spark chaos. Instead, he frequently chose deserted uplands or forest glades for his camps. At night, the beast coiled nearby, sleeping with one reptilian eye half open while Varos stared at the stars, pondering prophecies and cryptic inscriptions he had uncovered. He recalled old texts referencing the 10 shadows of ice, unholy beings scattered in remote wastes, each with the potential to raise unstoppable hordes of the dead. The so-called Night King, bested by alliances of men not long ago, might have been only a single harbinger of that deeper menace. Though the realm's folk believed the threat of White Walkers ended, he knew otherwise. Often, just before dawn, he lit a small brazier of his own, reciting half-remembered Valyrian incantations under his breath. He could sense the powers in him, newly awakened after his resurrection, responding more keenly each day. When the Red Priests had channeled their rites, they had touched a spark inside him that now burned steadily, far beyond a normal mortal's capacity. At times, he felt as if the god they called Lawler was not just guiding him but dwelling within him, or even that he was that god made flesh. He did not fully remember a time before his mortal existence, nor did he entirely recall the cosmic span of a deity's memory. Yet flashes intruded, glimpses of ancient battles of flame and ice, half-formed pictures of an eternal conflict. His statements to certain Red Priests, or even to Melisandre, had been half-intuitive truths that he was not mere man but an incarnate force. It was in the southwestern reaches of the land, near a stretch of rolling vineyards and distant river valleys, that his journey led him to an isolated hamlet overshadowed by a grand temple dedicated to the Seven. The tall building loomed with intricate spires, stained glass windows depicting the mother, the warrior, and the other aspects revered by most of the realm's populace. Varos landed his dragon far enough away not to alarm the entire settlement. Then, on foot, he approached, hooded in a simple cloak, though few men of his bearing could pass unnoticed. The temple courtyard was busy that afternoon, with worshippers passing under the watchful gaze of septas and septons. A handful of knights stood at the perimeter, exchanging stories. Village folk came to lay offerings or pray for a good harvest. The faith in the Seven still anchored much of this region, overshadowing foreign religions. Yet Varos strode calmly forward, heedless of the suspicious glances. He was not here to cause strife. He only wished to sense if any sign of the old darkness lurked. He suspected none, but had learned that many of these grand temples held hidden catacombs or old records. Possibly scraps of prophecy referencing what lay beyond the known White Walkers could be found even among volumes the faithful had preserved. When a stern-faced septon finally approached, demanding to know who he was and why he carried the aura of an otherworldly traveler, Varos answered simply, he was a wanderer, a man once touched by mortal wounds and restored by the Red Priests. He had come to glean if the temple archives contained mention of deeper threats. The septon bristled, replying that they kept no heretical red texts. Their tomes were dedicated to the Seven and to historical accounts that served that faith. This place does not welcome illusions, the septon said, his tone pointed, using a word some had begun to whisper about Varos's rumored sorcery. Varos remained calm, telling him that illusions were not the root of the matter, that the realm's illusions of security might crumble if a second wave of undead emerged. He simply sought knowledge. The septon, unconvinced, insisted that the White Walkers had already been defeated. The gods have returned us to peace, he declared. You speak of new horrors with no proof. We worship the Seven, not some distant flame. Varos gave the man a long, measured look, recalling how so many mortals were content to remain blind to creeping doom. He decided not to press the issue. If the temple withheld records, so be it. He turned away, striding back to where he had tied his cloak. If the people here cared not for warnings, that was their choice. A hush followed him as he left, the faithful uneasy about the robed stranger who spoke of other powers. He departed the hamlet, mounted his dragon, and soared onward, mindful that the clash between worshippers of the Seven and the Red Faith might deepen once news spread that a traveling champion declared the old war incomplete. Indeed, he had glimpsed the kind of friction that might erupt if more Red Priests decided to openly preach that the final long night still loomed. The faithful of the Seven might label it a heresy, a fear-mongering tactic. Perhaps open conflict would erupt between them if not carefully navigated. Varos recalled that the Queen or certain High Lords would not want to see the realm tear itself apart over religious disputes. But he suspected a reckoning drew near. The realm's illusions that the worst was behind them, that the Seven had protected them from a final onslaught, would be shattered if the deeper wave of White Walkers arrived. In mid-flight, he allowed the dragon to coast on a northerly current, scanning the horizon for signs of any keep or fortress that might house a library. He gleaned that not all knowledge resided in the capital. Some old barons or lords had private collections of dusty tomes. If any obscure volume referenced the 10 shadows, he wanted to see it. Days passed in this manner, a quiet quest. He found a few scattered leads, mostly half-lost references to an ancient prophecy that the First War had never ended, that a second wave would overshadow the known realms. Yet details were scarce. Meanwhile, the realm's undercurrent of tension bubbled in other ways. Agents from Braavos, some rumored to be linked with the same order that had tried to kill him, moved discreetly across the land. Several times, local gossip reached Varos's ears, a pair of foreigners, suspicious, asking questions about a traveling man with a dragon. On one occasion, he found a small inn where the keeper whispered to him that two quiet figures had come inquiring about a scarred man in red. Varos recognized the hallmark of assassins. Possibly Braavos would not rest. He made sure to keep the dragon always at the ready, sleeping with one eye open. He learned, too, that tensions with Braavos had grown at court. The Iron Bank pressed for certain debts, while rumors of conspiracies with the Faceless Order circulated. The Queen's Watchers in the capital apparently uncovered half a dozen alleged cells of masked killers, though only a few had been apprehended. The rest vanished into shadows. Varos found himself half-tempted to return to the city to personally root them out. But something in him told him to remain on the roads, gather knowledge, let the threads unravel in King's Landing as they would. Let the monarchy handle the immediate tangles. He had a greater calling. In the western hills near a rocky coast, he came upon a secret gathering of red priests and warriors loyal to them. He glimpsed from the sky a ring of torches on a secluded beach, men in red or black cloaks arranged in a wide circle, chanting at night. Intrigued, he guided the dragon to land a distance away. Then on foot, hood pulled up, he approached quietly. The waves lapped against the shore, blending with the chanting. As he got closer, the onlookers parted, alarmed to see a newcomer. But they recognized the red glow in his eyes, that intangible aura. Some dropped to a knee or bowed their heads. Others, more cautious, fingered their blades. A high priest stepped forward, tone uncertain. "Who intrudes upon our vigil?" Varos lowered his hood, letting the torchlight reveal his face. Whispers darted through the assembly. Some recognized him as the rumored man who had survived mortal slashes. The high priest swallowed, voice trembling slightly. We heard of your miraculous healing. Are you truly the one the texts call?" He trailed off as if unsure whether to voice the phrase living god. Varos spoke calmly, explaining he had heard their chanting from afar. The group parted, letting him see the center of their circle, a brazier in which an intense red flame danced as though it had an otherworldly life. Warriors in partial plate, each wearing some insignia of the Red Faith, stood around the perimeter. He sensed this was no mild congregation. These were fervent believers, armed and prepared to fight for their creed. The high priest, after a moment's hesitation, beckoned Varos closer to the brazier. "We gather to fortify ourselves against the illusions of safety that overshadow the realm. We sense a deeper winter brews. Lawler demands readiness. We have arms, we have men. We only lack the final sign. Some of us have heard rumors that the man who overcame mortal wounds might lead us." Varos let out a slow breath. So word spread swiftly among red priests. "I am no mere man," he stated softly, letting a faint glow emerge in his eyes. "You have guessed enough. The time approaches for you to gather more believers, for the war that men think ended is not ended. The White Walkers you saw were but the smallest wave. The real tide stirs, and it will overshadow all illusions. Are you prepared to stand?" A wave of excitement rippled through the group. The priest's voice grew fervent. "We stand, my lord. We only lacked a champion to unify us. Is it you? Do you lead us to purge the winter once and for all?" Varos paused, remembering that he once told Melisandre he was the living flame. He looked upon these men, seeing hope in their eyes. "Yes, but not yet," he said. "The realm is not ready for a sudden revelation. Spread the message quietly. Gather arms, gather followers. The final call will come when the second wave of ice threatens all. Then I shall stand openly. Meanwhile, let the monarchy believe their illusions of peace. We do not want panic." They nodded enthralled. One warrior, face covered with old scars, asked if they should confront the monarchy's faith in the Seven. Varos shook his head. Confrontation now would only fracture the realm. Let them worship how they will. Our mission is to ensure that when the winter truly comes, the red flame stands as a bulwark. We must not squander unity by picking fights with the Seven. Bide your time. The warrior bowed, subdued. The priest signaled acceptance of this strategy. The next hour saw them kneeling to Varos, pledging loyalty. He let them, though he kept the ritual short, unwilling to adopt a full public mantle. Soon, he parted from them under the cloak of darkness, returning to his dragon. The night wind carried a sense of momentum. More and more red faithful were rallying under clandestine gatherings, spurred by the rumors of a living champion. He felt the weave of destiny pulling tight. Meanwhile, back in the capital, as far as Varos gleaned from passers-by, a quiet clash with the realm's traditional faith was emerging. The High Septon in King's Landing had begun to speak out about strange foreign beliefs infiltrating, referencing unholy flames. Subtle messages aimed to stifle the Red Priest's influence. Some lords allied with the Seven might resent the spread of new dogmas. The monarchy found itself in a delicate balancing act, not wanting to ignite an open religious conflict. The Queen, for her part, tried to keep the peace in court. The monarchy's circles were abuzz with rumors that Braavos might be complicating matters, stirring tension behind the scenes. Many pointed to Braavos' silent endorsement of the assassins who nearly killed Varos. If the realm discovered more direct ties, it could spark conflict with that city-state known for its formidable bank and cunning spies. In the back corridors of the Red Keep, watchers rumored that ambassadors from Braavos faced intense scrutiny, but so far, nothing conclusive pinned them to the attack. Mysterious assassins continued to crop up. Reports trickled in of masked figures, each time vanishing as quickly as they came. Some were discovered strangled or stabbed in alleyways, possibly the result of internal power struggles among them. Varos had no direct involvement in that. He kept to the edges of the realm, forging quiet alliances with red-clad warriors or priests who revered the flame. Meanwhile, the monarchy's subtle maneuvers in court pressed to maintain stability. A few times, the Queen or her watchers sent riders searching for Varos, inviting him back to help quell the murmur of conflict. He chose not to respond promptly, trusting that the time was not ripe for him to show his face again in the capital. The monarchy still assumed the undead threat ended. They might not take kindly to him fanning fears of another White Walker wave. In the southwestern coastal lands, he found a small fortress whose lord had a library rumored to contain ancient scrolls about the war in the far north. The lord, seeing a single man approach with a monstrous dragon overhead, responded with trembling courtesy, letting Varos inside. Upon glimpsing Varos up close, tall, scar at the throat, red glint in his eyes, the lesser lord offered minimal hospitality, obviously uncomfortable. Yet Varos asked politely to see any old records. The library turned out to be 2 dusty shelves in a musty chamber. Varos discovered a partial account of a prophecy: when the first wave of ice falls, men rejoice. But the second wave is the dusk of all. 10 shadows roam the night. That matched what he had gleaned. He left the fortress at dawn, the lord grateful he departed peacefully. His biggest worry was the realm's illusions of unity. If a second wave of White Walkers crashed upon them unawares, men would be cut down. He had to unify the faithful but also avoid open religious war with the Seven. He mulled that puzzle each night as he studied the stars, sometimes feeling an unearthly presence stirring in the far north. It was distant yet not dormant. He guessed the next years or even months might see roving agents of the undead testing the outskirts. And he, the living flame, had to prepare for that moment. Time passed, nights turned to weeks. The monarchy's hold on the realm faced subtle turmoil. Some minor houses exp. Rest distrust of red priests. Others whispered about the Queen's court being infiltrated by Braavosi agents. Braavos itself bristled, disclaiming any involvement in the assassination attempt. Yet rumors flew that more contracts had been placed on key figures. Varos remained a prime target, presumably, but no new attacker had dared approach him while he roamed with a giant dragon. If anything, the assassins or their employers had concluded that so long as Varos traveled far from the capital, they had less impetus to strike. Or perhaps they bided their time. At last, near the approach of autumn, Varos resolved it was time to gather with more red priests and warriors. He had learned enough from solitary wandering. He wanted to unify them more systematically, forging a network of watchers who might detect undead stirrings anywhere in the realm. He recalled how the White Walkers had once advanced unopposed until it was nearly too late. That mistake would not repeat. He set course for a discreet location known to the Red Faith as a hidden assembly ground, a valley in the southwestern highlands featuring a natural amphitheater of stone. The faithful had used it in secret for gatherings to discuss matters the monarchy might not appreciate. He soared down upon that valley at dusk, discovering a gathering of robed figures and armed zealots already forming. Torches ringed a stony slope, men chanting in the old tongue. The low chant echoed off the cliffs, sending vibrations through Varos's chest. He recognized some faces from earlier run-ins. Others were new, a patchwork of knights, peasants, even a few minor lords who had converted to the flame. He dismounted the dragon at the outer rim, letting the watchers see him in full. They parted with awed hush, some dropping to kneel. He approached the center, the torchlight flickering across the ground. A tall warrior with a flame-emblazoned shield stepped forward, an expression of reverence. "We have awaited your return, my lord," he said quietly. "Word spread that you traveled the realm, gleaning secrets. We stand ready to heed your will." Varos looked upon them with measured calm. "Indeed, I have gleaned much. The threat we overcame before was only the smallest taste. The second wave of darkness simmers. I come to unify you so that when the true winter arrives we do not scramble blindly. We must have watchers in every region from the neck to the far south, prepared to rally men under the flame." The assembly let out murmurs of assent. Some obviously had heard bits of the prophecy. One priest, a stooped elder, asked, "And if the monarchy's faith stands in opposition? The Seven's hierarchy might call us heretics. Do we confront them?" Varos shook his head. "No direct confrontation. Let them keep their illusions. We prepare quietly. If the realm stands together in the final war, we avoid wasted bloodshed. But if they hinder us or side with the cold, then we do what is necessary." He addressed them in a near hush, describing how he had found references to 10 shadows of ice, how the so-called Night King was but one shard of a deeper pantheon of undead powers. The Watchers listened with growing dread. He said that if the monarchy preferred denial, so be it. Their job was to be ready. He told them to organize in cells across the land, to recruit skilled fighters, to track rumors of undead stirrings. "Our time will come," he concluded. "When it does, I shall call and you shall respond. Until then, remain quiet. The monarchy does not want panic, nor do we. The ancient texts hint that men must unify or perish." They began to bow or kneel, chanting praises. He stopped them with a raised hand, disclaiming the need for excessive worship. "Actions matter more than kneeling," he stated softly. "Be vigilant. Spread caution. That is the greatest service you do me." Still, they insisted on offering him respect as a living incarnation of the flame. He let them, though he refused any flamboyant coronation. By midnight, they had hammered out a rudimentary plan of communications. Runners or riders, each sworn to secrecy, would pass along sightings of suspicious undead or of any new infiltration. Braavos' assassins might also threaten them, so they established signals if a cell was compromised. Varos, listening, realized they were forging a clandestine network that might soon rival any formal spy ring. That suited him. A direct war with Braavos was not what he desired, but if those conspirators tried again, they would find a more united front. At dawn, the gathering dispersed. He lingered long enough to speak privately with the tall warrior who carried the flame shield. He told him that the faith must train new warriors specifically for the cold foe, employing weapons of dragoglass or Valyrian steel. The warrior nodded eagerly, pledging to begin forging or collecting such arms. The old elder priest likewise offered to delve deeper into arcane knowledge that might repel advanced forms of undead. Satisfied, Varos departed on his dragon, leaving behind an assembly newly dedicated to the cause. Meanwhile, in the capital, tensions with Braavos brewed hotter. The monarchy's quiet investigations suggested that certain Braavosi envoys might have supplied gold or information to the masked killers. King Robert reportedly fumed in council chambers, threatening to cut ties or block Braavosi ships if any further evidence of conspiracy emerged. Some lords cautioned him that angering Braavos, especially the Iron Bank, could cripple the royal finances. The monarchy balanced precariously between punishing the infiltration and preserving crucial economic ties. Some implied that if Varos truly had soared off into the land, perhaps he had no interest in retribution, so why should the crown push the matter? That sort of intrigue churned day by day, overshadowed by no immediate conclusion. At intervals, whispers that Varos might be something beyond mortal circulated in the court. Some said the Red Priests had performed a standard miracle. Others claimed Varos himself had channeled godlike energies. The Faith of the Seven dismissed such talk, labeling it dangerous nonsense. Yet certain courtiers found the rumors persuasive. The Queen's Watchers tried not to weigh in, seeing that the monarchy must remain impartial. But behind closed doors, the Queen confided to some that Varos's reappearance had struck her as uncanny. She worried that if he claimed to be a living deity, what turmoil might that unleash among the faithful who worshipped the Seven or the old gods? The monarchy could ill afford a religious upheaval, especially while foreign tensions simmered. In the northern strongholds, rumors of the second wave of White Walkers drifted like half-heard ghost stories. A few remote villages along the border reported seeing strange footprints in the snow or odd lights at night, though no confirmed sightings of undead. The local lords shrugged, attributing it to superstitious fear, given that the prior undead war was so recent. If Varos caught word of these ephemeral sightings, it merely reinforced his conviction that the real threat loomed. Possibly the Watchers needed more time to gather proof. He continued to ensure the hidden Red Priest's network documented each rumor, no matter how small. As for the assassins, additional sightings of black-clad figures occurred near the southwestern roads. Some travelers told tales of being questioned by masked men about the whereabouts of a scarred sorcerer. The monarchy, upon hearing such rumors, dispatched small squads of men-at-arms but found no trace when they arrived. Varos encountered none of these assassins directly. Possibly they learned caution. The overshadowing question remained, would Braavos escalate or retreat from direct confrontation? Some suggested that if the monarchy's watchers found definitive proof of Braavosi funding for the killers, war or at least severe sanctions might follow. And so Varos continued weaving through the land, forging subtle alliances with Red Priests, instructing them to move with care. In some quiet hamlets, he found that worshippers of the Old Faith or the Seven eyed him with suspicion. Now and then, a local septon confronted him, railing that he was a false prophet, that the realm needed no new religion. He always responded politely, repeating that a second wave of darkness would not spare those who refused to see. The septons sometimes spewed indignation, but none dared physically oppose him with a massive dragon on call. As the days shortened and autumn advanced, the evenings grew chilly. Varos sensed a shift in the air. He decided to curve back east, eventually reapproaching the capital's region from a different angle, possibly to keep an eye on how Braavosi envoys fared. One crisp evening, he soared over farmland near a broad river, intending to land in a remote orchard for the night. But while circling from above, he noticed flickering torchlight near a stone barn. A group of armed men clustered about, dragging a robed figure in red across the ground. It seemed an altercation was unfolding. The red robe suggested a priest or follower of the same flame he championed. Anger stirred in Varos's chest. He guided his dragon downward swiftly. The group below spotted the looming shape too late to hide. They scattered, some running, others brandishing crossbows or swords. The orchard lit up with torches. Varos leaped from the dragon's back even before Scourge fully touched down. A volley of crossbow bolts zipped through the air, but the untrained men fired erratically. Most bolts whizzed by harmlessly. One or two thudded into the dragon's thick scales, to no effect beyond an enraged roar. The men froze, hearts pounding at the monstrous roar. In that moment, Varos advanced, eyes glinting red in the torchlight. He saw the robed figure lying in the dirt, battered, hands bound, face bruised. Possibly a younger priest or an acolyte. The group who had beaten him or tried to abduct him wore a mishmash of gear, no consistent insignia. They seemed more like hired ruffians than official soldiers. Possibly they served local interests hostile to the Red Faith. One tried to slash at Varos with a short blade, screaming defiance. Varos sidestepped deftly, letting the man's strike pass wide. Another swung from behind. Varos caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisting it sharply until a crack echoed. The man dropped with a pained yell. The others, outnumbered by the dragon, panicked, some bolting for the trees. Varos let them flee. A couple tried to shoot crossbows again, but a savage roar from Scourge made them lose nerve. They scrambled away. Once the orchard cleared, Varos knelt by the wounded priest. The young man coughed, spitting blood, wide eyes full of gratitude and fear. They ambushed me, he rasped, claimed our Red Faith is a threat. They served some local interest that wants us gone. Thank you for intervening. Varos nodded, cutting the ropes that bound him. He recognized that tensions with the Red Faith were no longer confined to subtle court politics. Rural enclaves might lash out violently at any sign of foreign worship. You are safe now, he said, helping the priest to his feet. The man struggled to stand, multiple bruises or fractures. You arrived in time. Are you the one rumored to have cheated death? Varos let a small smile cross his lips. So it is said. Rest. Let me see your injuries. He found the man's ribs likely cracked, a bleeding gash on one temple. Varos placed a hand gently there, uttering a subdued chant in the old tongue. A faint warmth pulsed, sealing the worst of the bleeding. The priest gasped, eyes wide with wonder. Impossible. That was no minor skill. Varos shrugged lightly, indicating that if the Lord of Light willed, small miracles of healing were possible. The priest stammered that a local baron had declared the Red Faith unwelcome, stirring mercenaries to harass or kill them. We only wanted to gather a handful of believers, he lamented. But now we're hunted. Varos's eyes narrowed. The monarchy might not even be aware of such local brutality. This baron or local power used fear of foreign worship to stoke violence. If these pockets of hostility multiplied, it could hamper any hope of readiness for the real war. Gently, he steadied the priest, telling him to come with him for the night. He guided him to the dragon, who snorted but did not resist. They mounted carefully, Varos supporting the battered man, and soared away, leaving the orchard behind. The next day, he found a safer region for the priest to recover. He realized that the quiet conflict between the Red Faith and the older traditions was escalating. Thus, stories of small-scale clashes reached Varos's ears repeatedly. A village in the Midlands had driven out a traveling red acolyte, burning him at the stake for presumed witchcraft. Another pair of red pilgrims vanished, presumably abducted. The monarchy, far in the capital, might not have the resources or inclination to quell every such incident. Meanwhile, the monarchy struggled with rumored infiltration by more Braavosi assassins. All the while, travelers reported signs that the White Walkers were not truly gone. Unsettled animals scattered sightings of frost corpses at night in the far north. Eventually, Varos decided the time had come to re-engage with the monarchy directly, at least to present a partial picture of the realm's brewing tensions. He soared back to the capital once more, though not in a grand display. He landed his dragon near a field outside the city, letting it remain there with a few watchers he had discreetly enlisted. Then he entered on foot, wearing a hood to reduce immediate commotion. Nevertheless, once inside the Red Keep, word spread quickly that he had returned. The queen soon summoned him for a private conversation. The corridors felt steeped in anxious hush, as though the monarchy was balancing more crises than ever. In a modest council chamber, the queen stood with a handful of trusted watchers. She appeared more drawn than before, lines of worry etched on her brow. Varos, she said quietly, the realm stirs with new turmoil. I hear from each corner that worshippers of the Red Flame are meeting hostility. Meanwhile, Braavos teeters on the verge of open dispute with us. Our king grows restless, half wanting to send men to blockade their ports. Yet the Iron Bank might strangle us economically if we do. She paused, scanning his face, her tone softening. You have traveled widely. Is it as bad as rumor claims? Have you found signs of a deeper threat, or is it only men's fear after the last undead war? Varos exhaled slowly, letting the tension fade from his shoulders. He told her that, indeed, small enclaves of red priests had been attacked, local barons unleashing violence in pockets. He withheld the full revelation about a greater wave of White Walkers, but he hinted that the realm's illusions of security might be undone if they keep fighting over lesser matters. She looked grave, acknowledging that rumors of future horrors linger, especially among the devout, but the monarchy can't quell every rumor. She then asked about Braavos. The monarchy had discovered more circumstantial evidence linking Braavosi coin to the assassins who struck him. The queen worried that if they confronted Braavos openly, the realm might face embargo or infiltration by more killers. Varos responded calmly, pushing them too hard might indeed force a confrontation. For now, keep them at arm's length but gather proof. If I find further evidence in my travels, I will bring it to you. We must not plunge into war blindly. The kingdom needs unity. She nodded, expressing relief that he favored caution. He also confided that the quiet clash with the established faith of the Seven was intensifying in rural areas. She sighed, admitting the High Septon's rhetoric had grown vehement, labeling the Red Faith a dangerous foreign cult. Local lords loyal to the Seven had begun persecuting traveling red priests. She asked if he intended to encourage them to stand down. Varos weighed his words. I do not instruct them to wage open war. But some of them are zealots who see the White Walkers' last defeat as incomplete, wanting the realm to be prepared. Perhaps a middle ground can be found so they are not hunted by the faith of the Seven. She offered a tired half-smile. That is the monarchy's stance as well. We do not desire bloodshed between worshippers. But the tension grows. If you can help us calm the red priests, encourage them not to provoke the Seven, it might buy us time to handle Braavos. Without your voice, they might believe the monarchy stands against them. Varos nodded, suspecting that many red faithful were beyond simple calming words. Their fervor grew daily. Still, he promised to attempt some measure of moderation. While in the capital, he attended a few subdued gatherings in the royal circles. Tensions in court were palpable. Some knights openly scowled at the mention of red priests, while others recognized that Varos had personally survived a dreadful assassination attempt yet showed no ill will toward the realm. That contradictory image bred confusion. In hushed corners, ambassadors from Bravos walked on eggshells, aware that the monarchy eyed them with suspicion. A few mysterious murders in the city's backstreets fueled rumors that more assassins lurked. King Robert rarely hid his anger. Varos gleaned from watchers that the king had demanded, if we find a single shred of proof linking those Bravosi devils to the attack on Varos, we'll blockade their harbors. But thus far, no final link was found. Varos sensed that the monarchy's energy was splintered across these minor disputes, overshadowing the real cosmic threat. He tried to keep a low profile in court, meeting only with a select group of knights or lesser lords who were curious about his rumored miraculous healing. He withheld mention of the second wave of White Walkers, not wanting to spark mass panic. Instead, he advised them to remain vigilant, to fortify defenses, to watch for any sign of undead. They listened politely, though some doubted him. Amid these tensions, a subtle conflict simmered between the Red Faith and the worshippers of the Seven in King's Landing itself. Varos discovered that a small gathering of red priests had formed in a modest hall near the city's outskirts, meeting discreetly at night. The local septons had begun preaching against them from the pulpit, calling them false prophets. Fistfights had broken out in taverns. The monarchy tried to quell it by stationing guards near the red priest's hall, ordering them to keep things peaceful. Varos visited them once at twilight, finding them huddled around a brazier, speaking in hushed tones. They recognized him instantly, kneeling in deference. He told them softly to avoid stoking open conflict. The second wave of undead overshadowed any petty rivalry with the Seven. They agreed, but insisted they would not let their faithful be bullied. He parted with a heavy heart, seeing how easily mortals turned to infighting even as a greater doom brewed. Outside the city, a new rumor arose. A band of roving masked men had been spotted near a crucial crossroad, possibly the same assassins. Varos rode out on his dragon to investigate. He found only half-witness accounts, farm folk who had glimpsed shapes in the dark. No confrontation occurred. He wondered if Bravos was testing him or seeking a second chance to strike. Yet every day that he remained vigilant, no ambush manifested. Possibly the killers realized that with a single monstrous dragon on watch, they had little chance. The monarchy's men patrolled major roads, adding to the difficulty. Then, in the hush of an early morning, his black cloak. "Stay clear of trouble," he said curtly. "We can't help you if you get caught in the war. And if the others come, we'll need every sword we have. Don't count on any more help from us." Bran inclined his head. "Understood. Thank you for what you've given. I only pray we can all stand together when the time comes." Bowen Marsh did not reply, turning away. The gate swung open, and Bran's small party rode forth into the swirling snow. The horses whickered unhappily as though resenting the icy gusts, but they kept plodding onward. Hodder held the reins of one while Mira guided the other. Bran lay bundled on the travois, the sword disguised beneath spare blankets. He peered up at the wall as they passed around the outer perimeter. Its vastness never ceased to awe him, an ancient barrier older than any living man. One day that might be the stage of a final stand against the White Walkers. He shivered, praying that they would find a way to hold it. They turned south, following a narrow track that wound around the hills. The war had ravaged this area. If the rumors were true, small skirmishes, scouting parties. They must be ready for any threat. Bran only hoped they could slip through quickly and join Jon before the next great battle. Each jolt of the travois sent a wince through his stiff muscles, but he gritted his teeth and endured. The days blurred again. They traveled by daylight now, with horses to carry them, but the pace remained slow in the deep snow. Icy roads threatened to lame the horses, so Mira was careful, scanning the terrain for hidden ruts or patches of black ice. They encountered no people, only the occasional evidence that an army had passed through, hoofprints frozen in muddy tracks, old campsites abandoned in haste. Often they found the remains of campfires, half buried in drifts. Once they saw a corpse pinned under a fallen tree, its limbs stiff with frost. They skirted that gruesome sight quickly, for no good could come of lingering. On the 5th day out from Castle Black, they heard the distant clang of steel. Mira halted the horses immediately, ears perked. The clang repeated, sharper this time, echoing across a stand of leafless oaks. Then came a faint cry. It sounded like a woman's voice, or perhaps a young boy's. Hard to tell. Hodder shifted uneasily, muttering "Hodder" under his breath. Bran frowned. It could be a trap, or it could be someone in trouble. Mira nodded. "We won't rush blindly. Let's see from a vantage point." She guided the horses to a low ridge. Dismounting, she crept up with careful steps, spear in hand. Bran watched anxiously from the travois, half wishing he could warg into a raven to see from above, yet knowing the risk of that. He waited with bated breath. A moment later, Mira returned, face tight. There's a band of men in mismatched armor fighting a smaller group, maybe a family. I see a wagon overturned. Looks like a mother and 2 children cowering. The men are likely bandits or sells words. It's not a fair fight. Bran's heart twisted. Can we help? She looked torn. There are 5 or 6 of them armed with swords and axes. We're just 2 fighters if you count Hodder. You can't fight, obviously. But we have the sword, Bran said, reluctant but determined. It might give us an advantage. We also have the horses. If we catch them by surprise, he trailed off, remembering how lethal Mira could be with a spear and how Hodder, when guided by warging, could become a formidable force. But the idea of forcibly taking over Hodder's body made Bran ill with guilt. He hated doing that after everything they had been through. Still, if innocent lives were at stake. Mira grimaced, reading his thoughts. I'll fight on my own first. If it goes poorly, do what you must. She squeezed his shoulder. Stay here with the horses. Bran nodded, though every muscle in his body screamed at the danger. Be careful. Mira loosened the cloth around the ancient sword. For a moment she held it in her hand, studying the runes. The dark steel seemed to drink in the light. She took a breath, then secured it at her belt and kept her spear in her dominant hand. Hodder loomed beside her, fists clenched nervously. Together they crept down the ridge toward the sound of the clash. Bran bit his lip, wishing he could see more. He turned to the horses. The beasts flicked their ears, sensing his unease. In the distance, the clang of steel sounded again, followed by shouting. He strained to make out words. He thought he heard a man's voice bellow, hand over the girl, followed by a defiant cry from a younger voice. Then came another series of crashes, likely sword on shield. Bran's heart pounded. He set his jaw. If it went poorly, he would do what he must. Slowly, he closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. He felt the horse's dim awareness, flickers of life from a few small crows perched in nearby branches. He felt Hodder's presence too, bright and large but tinged with fear. The door in his mind that led to Hodder opened a crack and Bran fought the urge to step through. Not yet, he told himself. Only if absolutely necessary. A woman's scream split the air. Bran's eyes flew open. Enough. He sank back into his warging sense, letting his spirit flow into Hodder's mind. He felt the big man's confusion, the swirl of half-formed thoughts. Bran took hold gently, guiding that powerful body. In an instant, he could see through Hodder's eyes, Mira to his right, sprinting forward with her spear raised. A swirl of snow, a bandit lunging at them. Hodder roared, though the sound was Bran's own desperate cry channeled through him. He took control of Hodder's arms, lifting them to fend off the attacker. Clang! The man's sword slammed into Hodder's forearm. The pain was jarring, but Hodder's thick furs and sheer size absorbed much of the blow. Bran/Hodder seized the man by the shoulder, hoisted him up with terrifying strength, and hurled him aside. The bandit crashed into the snow, flailing. Another man came at them from the left, brandishing an axe. Mira intercepted him, spear darting forward in a lightning thrust. He stumbled back, blood streaming from a wound in his side. Bran/Hodder pivoted to see 2 more men near the overturned wagon, where a teenage boy swung a wooden club in a desperate attempt to protect the cowering woman and a younger child. One bandit kicked the boy to the ground. The mother shrieked. Mira's spear flashed in the corner of Bran/Hodder's vision, driving back another foe, but there were too many. In the tumult, the boy was about to be struck down. Bran/Hodder bellowed and rushed in. With powerful arms, they seized the bandit's wrist. The man cried out as Hodder's grip tightened, then snapped the bone with a sickening crack. The bandit wailed. Out of the corner of their eye, Mira wrested her spear free of a man's chest. Another bandit charged her from behind, sword raised. She had no time to turn. With a surge of adrenaline, Bran/Hodder lunged, tackling the attacker to the ground. They rolled in the snow, fists flying. The bandit headbutt Hodder's face, leaving him dazed. Bran grit his teeth and held on, letting Hodder's massive weight pin the man. He hammered a fist into the bandit's temple until the man went limp. The taste of copper filled Bran's mouth, no, Hodder's mouth. The confusion of senses was dizzying, but he pressed on. By then, the battle was all but won. 2 bandits lay dead, one was unconscious, one nursed a broken arm, and another crawled away, bleeding profusely. The last man fled into the trees. Mira panted, her spear tip stained red. Bran/Hodder wheezed. Slowly, Bran withdrew from Hodder's mind, letting the big man come back to himself. He felt Hodder shudder, saw him blink in confusion. The fight was over, but a hollow dread lingered. Hodder hated this, even if he lacked the words to say so. Bran hated it too, but it had saved lives. They glanced around. The boy groaned, clutching a bruise on his side. The mother sobbed, kneeling beside the younger child who trembled in shock. Mira, cheeks flushed, carefully approached them, hands raised to show she meant no harm. "Are you all right?" she asked. The mother's eyes were wide with fear. Yes, they attacked us. They wanted our wagon. My husband was killed last week by outlaws near the Dreadfort. I had no one to protect us." She broke into tears. The teenage boy, tears of anger in his own eyes, reached for the mother's hand. Bran, still panting, looked down at the bandits. The living ones moaned softly in the snow. He felt torn. Should they finish them off or leave them to fate? Neither choice was pleasant. Mira glanced back at him, uncertain. "We can't tend them. They might try to harm us again." Bran swallowed hard. We'll leave them. Let the gods decide." He turned to the mother and son. "We don't have much to give you, but are you able to travel?" She wiped her eyes, nodding shakily. "We're bound for White Harbor, hoping to find refuge. The wagon's broken, though. Maybe if we can fix an axle, we can press on." Mira frowned, walking over to inspect the wagon. The front wheel was cracked, the axle snapped. "You'd need a proper carpenter, or a miracle. The next major town is miles away. The roads aren't safe." The mother clutched her child. "What else can we do? We can't survive alone in the wild." Bran closed his eyes. The thought of these innocents wandering into more bandits weighed on him. "Maybe you can follow behind us for a bit, until we find a safer path. We have 2 horses, but we can't carry everyone." He hesitated, wanting to help, but uncertain how. The mother shook her head, tears brimming again. "You've already saved us. If I can just get the wagon upright, maybe I can salvage supplies from it." The teenage boy spoke up, voice trembling with residual terror. "We'll manage, Mother. We have to. I'll gather wood for a splint, maybe." Mira exhaled. "We'll stay a short while to help you gather what you can. Then we must go. There's a war brewing near Winterfell. Might be you'll find White Harbor safer. Though no place is truly safe these days." Nodding, the woman managed a grateful murmur. "Thank you." They spent an hour or so helping as best they could. Mira used her spear as leverage to right the wagon. The wheels were in bad shape, but the mother insisted she could make do with the spare parts she had. Bran offered them a piece of cheese from their meager rations, though he knew they themselves teetered close to running out. The bandits, left in the snow, either died of their wounds or crawled away when no one was looking. By the time they departed, the family had a small fire going near the wagon, set to attempt repairs before nightfall. As Bran's group rode away, he glanced back once. The mother stood by the meager flames, a determined set to her jaw. The teenage boy gave a small wave. It struck Bran that in the midst of chaos, simple acts of mercy might be all that separated good folk from the darkness creeping ever closer. And yet, he felt an ugly pang of guilt for warging into Hodder again. The following days passed with no further incidents of that kind, though the land felt increasingly tense, as if bracing for a cataclysm. They saw more scattered evidence of battles. Arrows lodged in tree trunks, footprints of large groups. Sometimes they smelled the faint reek of death drifting on the wind. Mira grew more alert. Hodder, too, seemed uneasy, occasionally muttering Hodder in a plaintive tone. They were well into the north, drawing closer to Winterfell's region. The snows thickened. One evening, they took shelter in a ruined watchtower that overlooked a frozen river. There, they encountered 2 men in battered mail warming themselves by a makeshift fire. At first, tensions ran high, but the men turned out to be deserters from House Serwyn who had lost faith in the Boltons after witnessing atrocities. They recognized the name Stark, if not Bran's face, and though they were wary, they did not attack. Over that brief shared night, they admitted many small folk and lesser knights were banding together with Jon Snow's forces. They mentioned rumors that Sansa Stark was at her brother's side, forging alliances. They also mentioned a looming battle set to take place on the plains north of Winterfell once the weather allowed. The Boltons had fielded cavalry and foot soldiers, while the Stark coalition had fewer men but more determination. Bran lay awake most of that night, listening to the deserters' low-voiced tales of Bolton cruelty. He thought of the crypts he had so recently visited, of the sword he carried. Perhaps this was the final push to restore House Stark. He prayed it would end swiftly, for the real war against the White Walkers loomed. Could it be that the Night King would strike while the North was preoccupied with its own battle? In the morning, the deserters left, heading for the outskirts of the Dread Fort or some other hideout, while Bran and his companions pressed on toward the rumored encampment of Jon Snow. Their hearts pounded with every mile. The land became increasingly familiar to Bran in some ways. He recognized certain bends in the White Knife River or old logging roads that once supplied Winterfell. But he also saw the scars of war. Burned farmsteads, empty holdfasts, fields churned into muddy devastation where armies had passed. Little wonder the Boltons or the northern houses found it hard to gather sustenance. Winter had come, and with it chaos. Finally, on a cloudy afternoon, they crested a gentle rise and beheld an encampment spread across the plain below. Scores of tents dotted the snow, many bearing sigils of various northern houses. Bran spotted the Merman of Manderley, the tall reeds of House Reed, the Bear of Mormont, the Stag of Baratheon. No, wait, that might have been a repurposed banner. More importantly, he saw the dire wolf of House Stark. A wave of emotion almost overwhelmed him. So the rumors were true. Northern houses had gathered around the Stark name. Mira breathed a sigh of relief beside him. Hodder gave a soft "Hodder" as though sensing the significance. They urged their horses onward, descending the slope. As they neared the outskirts of the camp, sentries rushed forward, spears and bows at the ready. A cry went up, "Halt! Who approaches?" Mira raised her hand. "Friends, we seek Jon Snow and Sansa Stark." One of the sentries, a grizzled man with a gray beard, eyed them suspiciously. "Everyone's seeking them. State your name and business." "I'm Mira Reed of Greywater Watch, sworn to House Stark," she declared clearly. Then, gesturing to Bran, she added, "And this is Bran Stark, rightful son of Eddard Stark, thought lost but returned." A murmur rippled through the guards. Some looked disbelieving, others startled. The tension crackled. "Bran Stark," the bearded sentry repeated. "Alive?" Bran lifted his head, heart thudding. "Yes. I'm here to see my brother and sister. Please take me to them." They conferred in urgent whispers. Finally, one man ran off deeper into the camp while the rest kept their weapons trained in caution. The wait stretched on painfully, but at last, a larger group emerged from between the tents. Bran recognized the flame-haired Tormund giant's bane among them, as well as a tall, stern woman with short blonde hair, Brienne of Tarth, if memory served. Their presence confirmed the wildlings and others had indeed joined with Jon. Then he saw her, Sansa. She wore a heavy cloak of gray fur, her hair parted and braided, her expression both regal and anxious. The moment her eyes fell on Bran, she froze. Even from a distance, he saw her features go slack with shock. Then her lips parted. "Bran," she whispered, voice carrying in the hush. A lump rose in Bran's throat. He wanted to call out her name, to leap from Hodder's arms and embrace her, but of course he could not. Instead, Hodder stepped forward, gently setting Bran down so he could rest on the travois. Bran managed a trembling smile. "Sansa," he said, tears pricking his eyes. It's me." Her composure broke. She rushed forward and all but fell to her knees beside him, arms wrapping around him in a fierce hug. "Gods," she murmured, "how is this possible?" She cupped his face, eyes searching his features. "We thought you lost. We heard rumors, but, oh, Bran." Tears glistened on her cheeks. Around them, the onlookers lowered their weapons, stunned into a hush. Bran's own tears came unbidden. He had never been as close to Sansa as he'd been to Arya, but the sight of his sister, alive and free, was overwhelming. He stammered, I traveled beyond the wall. There's so much to tell. Are you all right? Are you?" She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I'm better now after everything. Jon's here too. By the gods, he'll be overjoyed." She looked at Mira, recognition dawning. "Mira Reed?" Mira bowed her head. "Yes, Lady Sansa." Sansa stood, composing herself. "Come. You must be half dead with cold. Jon's in the command tent. We'll fetch him." She turned to Tormund and Brienne. "Help them. Find them somewhere warm to rest. Summon my brother." Brienne nodded, looking amazed. "Yes, my lady." Tormund gave a toothy grin, murmuring something about more Starks crawling out of the snow. The camp sprang into a subdued flurry of activity. Bran was lifted gently by a pair of burly wildlings, while Hodder followed, repeating "Hodder" in a strangely relieved tone. Mira walked beside them, her posture finally relaxing a fraction now that they'd found allies. As they wended through the maze of tents, Bran's heart hammered. Any moment he would see Jon. How would Jon appear? Changed, no doubt, after death and resurrection. The swirling excitement jostled with fear of what might come next, fear of the White Walkers, fear that even with House Stark reunited, time might be too short. But for now, he let himself cling to the joy of being among family. However brief, this was a homecoming long overdue. They reached a large tent near the center, guarded by two stern-faced men wearing mismatched armor. Inside, the tent was lit by lanterns, the ground covered with strewn rushes. Maps lay on a wooden table weighed down by stones. Bran could see the banners pinned to the canvas walls: stark gray dire wolf, Mormont bear, hornwood stag, a patch of scraggly black fur that must belong to Tormund's wildlings. And standing over the table was Jon Snow. He turned at their entrance, dark hair brushing his collar, a slight beard shading his cheeks. His eyes, haunted but warm, flicked in Bran's direction. He froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jon crossed the distance in 3 long strides, kneeling beside Bran as Sansa had. His voice was thick with emotion. "Bran," he blinked, tears threatening. "I never thought." "Where?" Bran let out a choked sob, reaching for him. "Jon, I'm sorry, there's so much." Jon pulled him into a fierce embrace, and Bran felt the warmth of family he thought he might never know again. Jon smelled of leather and wood smoke, and there was a tension in his frame that suggested pain and burdens beyond measure, yet he held Bran with a gentleness that spoke volumes. After a long moment, Jon pulled back, hands on Bran's shoulders. "You're alive," Sansa said, "but I couldn't believe until I saw you." Tormund cleared his throat in a rare show of sensitivity. "You Starks can talk alone if you want. The rest of us will give you space." He jerked his head at the men gathered. They began to shuffle out of the tent. Only Sansa, Brienne, Mira, and Hadar remained. Jon helped Bran to a stool with soft cushions. Bran settled, tears still damp on his cheeks, and gazed at his brother. "Or the monarchy." He said it was unclear, but it smelled of deeper malice. They scoured the area, found no immediate suspect. The monarchy realized the city was a hive of conspiracies. Varos only thought bitterly that men wasted energies on petty darkness when a cosmic wave threatened all. Time slipped on. The Queen, her watchers, even King Robert struggled with new conflicts daily. The monarchy was forced to juggle the threat of the faith turning openly hostile if the Red Priest zealots grew bolder. Bravos remained an ominous presence. The monarchy's men in the north sporadically reported more undead sightings, though small in scale, overshadowed by denials. Through it all, Varos kept his counsel, sometimes offering hints or quiet reassurance to the Queen that if a greater wave broke, he would stand with them. She confided that she had grown to rely on his calm presence, though she suspected he withheld truths. He admitted he must, not wanting to start a war of faith. Eventually, near the cusp of winter's approach, an unexpected call came. The Red Priests and warriors from the south had begun migrating discreetly toward the capital, presumably to gather. The monarchy's watchers discovered their movement, raising alarm about a possible march on the city. Varos intervened, meeting a small group of those warriors on the outskirts. They insisted they came only to show solidarity, not to besiege the capital. He told them to remain outside, in a field near a minor hamlet, to avoid inciting the monarchy's knights. So, for a time, hundreds of flame warriors encamped a day's ride from the city, stoking fear among local peasants. The monarchy demanded Varos persuade them to stand down. He, in turn, explained they only sought readiness. The monarchy half-threatened to brand them outlaws if they caused trouble. Varos sighed, bridging these tensions day by day. Meanwhile, word arrived that Braavosi envoys had redoubled their influence, possibly bribing local spymasters in the capital. Rumors soared that more assassins had filtered in. The monarchy's watchers captured one man, but he died under interrogation, revealing little. A stifling sense of dread spread in royal circles. They were caught in a standoff with Bravos, uncertain if war or sabotage might erupt at any moment. The Queen confided to Varos that the monarchy considered severing all ties with Bravos, but worried it would invite covert war in the streets. Varos told her to remain calm, gather intelligence, and if forced, let him handle the killers. All the while, overshadowing everything, subtle sightings of undead at the far edges trickled in. Some watchers reported that local pockets of wildlings or rangers found frostbitten corpses reanimating. The monarchy refused to proclaim a realm-wide threat. They had not assembled the banners. But the Queen's eyes conveyed fear whenever she updated Varos on these scraps of news. He told her in solemn tones that the second wave might be at least partially stirring. She asked how soon. He admitted he could not say. Possibly months, possibly longer. The realm might see only scouting raids. She pressed him to share more about his belief in 10 shadows. He kept it vague, sensing the monarchy might find it too grand a horror to accept right now. In the final weeks before the snows fell, he sensed a new resolution forming in his heart. He realized the swirl of religious conflict, Braavosi infiltration, and monarchy's caution might hamper the realm from truly uniting. Perhaps the day drew near when he would have to reveal a fraction more of his power to unify or quell lesser disputes. As he walked the Red Keep's corridors at night, torchlight flickering on the stone walls, he recalled how easily the first undead wave had nearly devoured men until alliances overcame it. That alliance no longer thrived. The monarchy was fractured by suspicion, the capital's faith in the Seven opposed to the Red Priests, Braavo's meddling in the shadows. If the next wave of White Walkers arrived in force, the realm might tear itself apart before they even marched. That was the darkest possibility. One night, standing on a high balcony, he gazed at the cold moon. He quietly murmured a vow that he would not allow mortal squabbles to doom them. If necessary, he would forcibly unify men under the banner of the flame. But a part of him balked at the idea of imposing tyranny. He was, after all, still a being who remembered mortals had free will. Yet the memory of telling Melisandre, "I am your god, here to unite this world," echoed. Maybe it was destiny that he enforce unity if it failed to form naturally. He closed his eyes, letting the wind buffet his hair, chest tight with the weight of that choice. The next morning, he quietly approached the queen in a smaller solar, telling her he planned to venture north once more. She asked if he would vanish for weeks again. He admitted possibly, but promised to return if the monarchy needed him. She half-jokingly said she always needed him, but then grew serious, saying tensions with Braavos might erupt at any moment. The flame warriors in the south stoked concerns, the faith bristled, the king roared about blockades. She wondered if he truly wanted to leave that swirl behind. He gave a tired half-smile. The real swirl is in the far north, stirring in the dark. This local swirl is men's illusions. If a new wave of White Walkers does indeed approach, we might find ourselves forced to unify. Perhaps I can glean direct proof in the north. She did not forbid him, knowing his unstoppable will. She just urged caution. And so, one final time, Varos took his monstrous dragon outside the gate, soared into the sky. The watchers of the city parted in a hush. In a single day's flight, he reached the broad fields that led to the neck, pausing only at dusk to rest. Then another day's flight, and he approached the bleak terrain near the border where the cold winds nipped. He landed eventually near a small fortress that once served as a watch against undead, though the local lords insisted no large threat remained. The garrison there recognized him from rumors, letting him approach under wary eyes. He told them he sought any sign of reanimated corpses or pale figures in the wastes. They had only scattered rumors, no certain evidence. He pressed onward. He spent a week in the northern expanses, searching the edges of haunted forests, ice-choked lakes, old watchtowers. At times, Scourge's roars echoed across empty canyons. He found footprints in the snow that ended abruptly, as if the walkers had melted away or flown. He discovered half a dozen partially devoured animal carcasses that carried a frigid aura reminiscent of the undead's presence. But no direct confrontation. Possibly they hid. Possibly they tested. He recalled old prophecies that the real wave would not march in small squads, but in unstoppable legions led by multiple generals. He exhaled a misty breath, concluding that the final storm had not yet truly begun. He decided to linger in one lonely watchtower for a short time, using it as a vantage point. He placed wards of his own design around the tower's perimeter, incantations from the Red Faith that might alert him if a cold presence approached. For some nights, the wards remained silent. On the third night, the wards flickered with a faint alarm. He rushed outside, scanning the moonlit snow. In the distance, he glimpsed silhouettes crossing a ridge. He readied himself, pressing a hand to his chest where the red flame throbbed. But the silhouettes, if indeed they were undead, vanished into the gloom without engaging. The wards dimmed. He realized they might be scouts, verifying the land's watchers. The silent tension was maddening, but he had no illusions about chasing them alone. If it was but a scouting party, they'd slip away. If it was a trap, he risked fighting an unknown number of undead. In the end, the shapes retreated. By the time he returned to the tower, he felt the cold wind biting his cheeks, the starry sky mocking him with its silent twinkle. So the second wave was indeed stirring. For how long would they hide? Perhaps until the realm was most divided. That was the time they would strike, overshadowing men's illusions. Varos clenched his fists, cursing the monarchy's short-sighted entanglements. If the final wave came soon, they would be ill-prepared. Yet he had done what he could, forging hidden alliances among red warriors, gleaning knowledge. He resolved that soon he might have to unify them forcibly. He spent one last night in that watchtower, scanning the horizon for movement. None reappeared. Dawn came bleak and cold. He took flight again, carrying with him the certainty that the next war overshadowed all petty conflicts. His route led back south. Another week's slow journey, scattered stops, some nights in lonely glens or windy ridges. He felt exhausted, though physically strong. The mental burden weighed on him, how to rouse the realm without igniting a civil war between the Seven's faithful and the Red Priests. How to handle Braavos' sabotage. How to ensure the monarchy recognized the second wave. Each day in the air brought him closer to the uneasy conclusion that either he soon revealed a fraction of his cosmic might, forcing men to heed, or the realm would remain fractious, blindsided by the undead when they came. He debated the timing of such a revelation. Eventually, he approached the capital's outskirts again under a crimson sunset, the city's walls familiar, the watch turrets bristling with archers. One might imagine, in another age, that archers would panic at the sight of a monstrous dragon, but they had grown used to him. He landed in the usual field near a modest guard post. The watchers greeted him tensely but recognized him, letting him pass. Inside, the rumor of his return spread, though not as dramatically as before. By now, the monarchy had seen him come and go. He found the queen's watchers waiting, leading him to a private hall. The queen stood near a table covered in parchments, a hush in her posture. She demanded to know if he found actual evidence of a second White Walker wave. He recounted the partial sightings, footprints, glimpses at night, a scouting sense. She paled, pressing a hand to her brow. We are undone if they truly march in force soon. The realm is not united. The lords barely overcame the first wave. My councils bicker over trifles. And the faith rails against your kind. Meanwhile, Braavos threatens sabotage. We cannot fight on so many fronts. Varos placed a reassuring hand on the table's edge. I shall not let the realm face it alone. There are pockets of devout warriors pledged to me. I have gleaned knowledge. But the monarchy must quell the rising hostility with the Seven, or we risk a religious war overshadowing everything. The second wave will exploit our division if it arrives soon. She sighed heavily, admitting the monarchy had tried. The High Septon refused to moderate his stance. Tension soared in villages. She asked if Varos could restrain the Red Priests from inciting more. He nodded, stating he would do what he could, though many among the faithful believed an unstoppable war approached. They might see the monarchy's inaction as a betrayal. Days turned into nights, and Varos again found himself a quiet fixture in the keep's corridors. The monarchy wrestled with crises, Braavos' infiltration lingered, the High Septon roared about the infiltration of foreign flame, men whispered of rumored undead sightings in the north. He watched, contemplating when to act decisively. Meanwhile, he corresponded with pockets of red warriors, telling them to stay hidden, keep training. He learned from traveling bards that random watchers in remote passes claimed an increase in night roamers, though no full undead army. The realm's illusions wore thinner each day. Then, at last, a new spark threatened to blow everything open. In the capital's western district, a large sept that had grown staunchly anti-red faith took the extreme step of capturing 2 red priests who had dared preach in a local square. They paraded them as heretics, chained them inside the sept's courtyard, threatening to burn them in reprisal for perceived blasphemies. Word spread like wildfire, reaching the monarchy at dawn. The monarchy's watchers scrambled to prevent a riot. Tensions flared as a group of red-cloaked zealots stormed the sept's gates. A bloody clash erupted in the street outside. Varos, hearing the uproar, rushed with a handful of watchers to intervene. By the time they arrived, the red zealots had battered down the sept gates. The sept's defenders retaliating, chaos everywhere. The monarchy's men tried to quell it, but emotions ran too high. Varos forced his way into the courtyard, ignoring the swirl of swords, letting a fiery light glint in his eyes. He bellowed for the combatants to halt. Some recognized him at once, stepping back in awe. The red zealots parted with reverence, calling him their living flame. The sept's defenders gawked, uncertain if this was a demon or some monstrous being. The 2 captured priests cowered near a post, battered. Varos stepped to them, cutting their bonds swiftly, ignoring the ring of onlookers. The monarchy's watchers arrived soon after, King's men brandishing arms, telling the mob to disperse. The sept's defenders, outraged, insisted these 2 were heretics. The red zealots roared that the faith had no right to chain or burn them. The entire courtyard bristled with lethal tension. Then Varos raised his voice, calling upon both sides to stand down, reminding them that a second wave of undead might loom, that an internal war served only the darkness. The Watchers pleaded for calm. Some in the courtyard began to relent, uncertain how to respond to Varos's presence. But a handful of the Sept's most fervent faithful refused to yield, shouting that they would die rather than see red heresy pollute the capital. Another wave of scuffling broke out. Varos, exasperated, realized it might end in bloodshed unless he displayed a show of power. He closed his eyes, chanting a short phrase in the old tongue. A glow rose around him, as though the air ignited with red sparks. People stepped back in alarm. He flung his hand outward, not to kill but to conjure a swirl of flame that arced overhead, an impressive but non-deadly manifestation. The Watchers stared, transfixed. The fighting halted abruptly, all eyes on the scorching swirl. A hush fell. Seizing that moment, Varos declared in a commanding voice that no man here was the enemy, that the real foe lurked beyond the realm's frontiers. If they wasted themselves in internal slaughter, they would pave the way for the undead. The monarchy's Watchers took advantage of the stunned hush to separate the groups. Freed from their chains, the two battered priests clung to Varos, thanking him tearfully. Varos cast a final, piercing look at the Sept's defenders, saying quietly, "If you abhor our faith, so be it. But do not forget that if the real winter returns, you will pray for any flame. The day may come that you beg for my help. Reflect on that." He left the courtyard with the monarchy's men, the air thick with awe and resentment. The monarchy, for its part, recognized that Varos's timely intervention had prevented a full-scale riot. But they also realized a single swirl of conjured flame displayed power that overshadowed normal men's illusions. News of this incident spread rapidly. Some hailed him as a savior for preventing mass bloodshed in the Sept courtyard. Others whispered he had forcibly used arcane might to subdue men of the Seven. Tensions soared anew. The monarchy tried to quell rumors that a demon's flame had incinerated half the courtyard, though no one had actually been hurt by that conjuration. Meanwhile, the Red Zealots celebrated Varos's act as a sign that he indeed carried the living deity within. The monarchy worried more about the faith's reaction. Indeed, the High Septon railed that the capital had witnessed open witchcraft. While the monarchy's Watchers scrambled to contain the fallout, Varos retreated to the keep's higher corridors, drained by the confrontation. Yet he could not deny that a sense of inevitability pressed him. The more the realm warred internally, the more he might have to exert near-divine authority. If a second wave of White Walkers arrived tomorrow, men would be too busy squabbling over faith to unite. That thought hammered at him. Possibly the day was near for him to proclaim openly that the realm needed to unify under his flame or face annihilation. But he still weighed the potential catastrophic backlash. He had told Melisandre he was the living god. She believed wholeheartedly. Large segments of the population might recoil if he said the same. He took a short walk outside the keep after nightfall, ignoring stares from guards. His dragon waited in the field beyond the gate, as it had so many times. He placed a hand on the creature's scaled flank, letting out a sigh. If only men realized how precarious their illusions were. The monarchy's Watchers at the gate asked if he would depart again. He said not tonight, perhaps soon, though. He had gleaned enough. The realm was on a knife's edge of religious conflict, tension with bravos, infiltration by assassins, local strife, rumors of undead, and general denial. He passed the following days in a tense calm. The monarchy made half-hearted attempts at reconciling the faith with the Red Priests. The High Septon refused to see Varos personally, calling him a false flame. Bravosi envoys withdrew some staff from the city, apparently a partial measure to quell suspicion. The queen privately told Varos she wished she had more direct authority to unify them. But the king's temper, the faith's power, and Bravos's cunning all limited her. Varos offered no easy solution. He told her quietly that if a second wave of White Walkers marched soon, all these illusions would be shattered anyway. She admitted a trembling fear that men might not be ready. Late one evening, A rumor circulated that certain masked killers had tried and failed to approach Varos's lodging. The Watchers apparently found footprints on the roof, but no confrontation occurred. Varos heard about it in the morning, unsurprised. Possibly Braavos' meddling continued. Possibly they recognized that direct assault was futile. The monarchy's Watchers, for their part, reported no new leads. Tedium reigned. Meanwhile, subtle friction with the faith lingered, sporadic brawls or small arrests continuing. The monarchy strove to keep it from erupting fully. As winter's first real chill descended, Varos sensed the realm's illusions wearing thin. He decided that if the second wave of undead truly loomed, events might soon accelerate. Perhaps the undead themselves waited for the perfect moment, for the realm to fracture. Or perhaps they consolidated their power far beyond the northern wastes. In either case, he had laid some groundwork for an eventual call to arms. Warriors of the Red Faith, scattered enclaves, certain knights or minor lords who had grown loyal to him. That might suffice if men turned wholeheartedly to his flame in the final crisis. If not, the land might drown in endless night. He spent a final quiet night in a tower chamber, the wind rattling shutters, pondering the swirl of choices. He recalled old inscriptions about 10 shadows, referencing a primordial cycle of ice that overshadowed centuries. He let his eyes flicker with the red glow. If he indeed carried the deity's essence, it was his role to break that cycle. Mortal illusions or not, he would ensure the White Walker's second wave did not devour humanity, even if that meant toppling any who opposed his unifying command. The monarchy might find that day harsh. Braavos might find it unstoppable. The faith might cry heresy, but the realm's survival outweighed their illusions. Thus, the stage was set for the next storm, a realm riven by tension, a foreign city quietly sponsoring assassins, a devout red faith growing in militancy, the monarchy frantically juggling alliances, and Varos, once nearly slain, now perfectly healed, standing in the shadows, mind brimming with cosmic purpose. If the second wave of White Walkers advanced tomorrow, men would have nowhere to hide unless they rallied under the living flame. He closed his eyes, letting a quiet vow form on his lips that when the final storm broke, he would reveal enough power to unify them or let them fall. The nights ahead would test every vow, every illusion. And he was ready, body renewed, mind unyielding, determined that the day of the undead would meet a living deity's flame. So ended his quiet watch in the capital's hush, awaiting the call that only fate could ring.